Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Last week, a closed session was held pursuant to Government Code 54956.9B1 with counsel conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, significant exposure. One case, there is nothing to report. I'd like to move to the consent agenda. Is there any member of the board, staff, or public who would like to pull a consent agenda item? Yes. Which item would you like to pull?
This is the Red Cross.
Oh, got it. Okay, we'll pull item number 3. Thank you. Don't go away. Any member of the board?
Item 4, please.
Oh, 4, yes, thank you. Okay. May I have a motion on the balance?
Yes, I move the balance of the consent agenda.
Second. We have a second.
Second from Mr. Thomas. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes on a 5-0. Thank you. Item number 3.
Yes, my name is Carol Messner. I'm the Motherlode District Manager for the Sacramento Sierra chapter of the Red Cross. I would like to thank the board for your resolution making March Red Cross Month here in Calaveras County. I'd like to tell you a little bit about our chapter and our activities here in Calaveras County. First of all, we are the Sacramento Sierra chapter. Part of that, we cover a 9-county area going all the way from metropolitan Sacramento to Alpine County, so it's a big chapter, very diverse. My office is in Sonora, and I cover Amador, Calaveras, Tuolumne, and part of Alpine County. So in this area, we respond to large disasters as well as small disasters. If there's a need for a evacuation or a large response to something, we work very closely with the Calaveras County OES department. They are wonderful partners for us, and we are so pleased to be able to work with them. They're great coordinating opportunity. Red Cross cannot and does not work in a vacuum. We like to have contact with county agencies, governmental agencies, as well as other non-governmental organizations. And by working with the OES, we're able to coordinate all that and provide the citizens of Calaveras County with the very best possible service that we can. I'd also like to introduce, I wanted to talk a little bit about Haiti. Terry Bullock, who is our OES link here, is with us today. He has some handouts that we can give to you. Obviously, Haiti has been in the news a lot. On our district alone, we've probably raised $25,000 to $35,000 just in this area alone to benefit Haiti. We've had some very, very nice donations from our local businesses. The Angels Market and Murphy's Market just donated almost $7,000. They ran a dollar donated for every 25 spent at both of their markets, and that was the results. So that will be heading off to Haiti. But we also do local responses. We respond to anywhere between 30 to 50 single-family fires here in the Motherlode District, and that is always, as always, the bulk of what Red Cross does. But we do have about 30 volunteers here in Calaveras County that are responding to those single-family fires, but who are also ready to open shelters and prepared to operate those shelters and feed people should there be a need for a large evacuation. And I would also like to take this opportunity to introduce to you our new Emergency Services Director, Mr. Phil Davis, and I will let him come up and talk to you a little bit and tell you a little bit about his background. And thank you again so much for recognizing Red Cross.
Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Phil Davis. I'm your new Director of Emergency Services. Thanks for the resolution. We do appreciate that. In my previous life, I have spent some time in Calaveras County fighting fire. And I had a 30-year career in the fire service before being recruited by the Red Cross, and had an opportunity to spend some wonderful nights at the Jumpin' Frog Fairgrounds, at base camp, or sleeping on the ground in Sheep Ranch. So I just wanted to say thank you again for the resolution, let you know that I've only been on board for about 2.5 months. I am anxious to get to know all of the 9 counties that we serve, and should an event occur here, and we're working cooperatively with you and your OES, setting up shelters. I just wanted you to know the face and the name, because I'll be around assisting. Thanks again.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. I know that Calaveras, through our MAC team, because I've seen Terry there several times over the year, have worked very closely with the Red Cross whenever we've put them on emergency, the MAC, what is it, Terry? Multi-agency coordinate, thank you. You get so used to the acronyms, you forget what it stands for. Over the years, we've worked very closely with the Red Cross, and we appreciate the partnership that we have. Thank you. So,
Move to
my
adopt.
colleagues,
Move to adopt the resolution.
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Nobody will oppose. It passes on a 5-0. Thank you. Mr. Kelly.
Joe Kelly, the proposed County Assessment Appeals Board Conflict of Interest Code, Section 9, disqualification. No designated employee shall make, participate in making, or in any way attempt to use his or her official position to influence the making of any governmental decision which he or she knows or has reason to know will have a reasonably foreseeable material financial effect distinguishable from its effect on the public generally, on the official, or a member of his or her immediate family.
Mr. Kelly, could you please tell us where you're reading from in the code?
Disqualification, Section 9.
Please proceed.
How is suing the county in Superior Court, which is the requirement within R&T Code's California Board of Equalization's Assessment Appeals Manual, to seek remedy through the court's review of a Calaveras County Board of Equalization hearing for the following reasons? 1, lack of due process. 2, actual or constructive fraud. 3, abuse of discretion. 4, an erroneous appraisal methods incapable of producing the correct value. Somewhere in the 4, the issue of a Board of Equalization member introducing personal knowledge of comparable sales into the testimony during the appeal hearing. Again, how is suing the county in Superior Court a conflict of interest to a citizen, a taxpayer, applying for a position on the Assessment Appeals Board? September 1st, 2009, Agenda Item 8, discussion and possible action regarding appointment of applicants to the Board of Equalization Assessment Appeals Board. Vice Chair Callaway declared the applicant, Mr. Kelly, has a conflict of interest. He's suing the county. A letter requested by Chairman Thomas, filed with the clerk, noticed in correspondence, has gone unanswered. Madam Chair, no one has attempted to clarify your statement. Will you do so now publicly? Your alternative is a public apology to me. Your continued failure to clarify your statement will emphasize your lack of personal conviction. Your apology could provide for allegations of discrimination. Take your pick. This is your election year, and you created the issue. Will you resolve it? In closing, you denigrate the integrity of the Superior Court. Thank you.
Appreciate your comments, Mr. Kelly.
Pardon me?
Appreciate your comments. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to address on item number 4? If not, may I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
A motion by Mr. Thomas, second by Mr. Tryon. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes on a 5-0. Thank you. I'd like to move to public comments. These are items that are not on the agenda, and no action will be taken by the board. Direction could possibly be given. Does anyone have an item they would like to discuss that is not on the agenda? I'd like to now move,
Good morning, Howard Stolman, your Chief Information Officer. This morning, each of you should have received a letter of support for the Motherlode Broadband Project. I think it was laid on your chairs or someplace on your desk. This is not the same two items that I will be addressing a little later on in the meeting, but is a separate application through a different federal process for stimulus money. So what I would like to do is acknowledge this request. It is a complimentary request for support, and then seek your authorization to work with the board chair again to develop a letter of support for this project as well.
so, Mr. Stolman, what you're asking is that you would just like to work with the person who wants us to write this letter, and you will bring it back at another time? Because
Yes.
it isn't agendized, and it is somewhat related to item 11 and 12, correct?
It is related in that it is a stimulus application for rural broadband. It is going through a different federal process, and it actually addresses the last mile issue. Our
Is the middle mile.
application is a middle mile.
Okay, do any of the board members have a problem with Mr. Stolman proceeding, and then it will come back?
But I have a quick question. It seems like we have lots of different entities that are wanting to provide broadband for the county. And it would seem to me that there'd be some sort of efficiencies if these folks would work together rather than having a whole bunch of sort of independent requests. And so I'm basically assuming that you and your department are providing, to the extent possible, some coordination between these entities?
We are.
Okay,
And I will cover that in a little more detail as we move forward.
that's fine.
Okay, Howard, proceed. Go ahead, thank you. Okay, since there's no other, okay.
Good morning. My name's Bonnie Newman. I'm from Double Springs, and today I'd like to talk about Gila monsters. You know what a Gila monster is? It's a short, stubby little lizard-like creature that lives in the desert. If it's 12 inches long, its jaws are about 6 inches, and it has this vicious clamping bite, and it's poisonous. And when I was a kid, my dad used to go prospecting. I used to go with him, and he'd tell me to watch out for Gila monsters, because if you turn over a rock and you see one, get out of there quick, because at first they don't move very fast, but pretty soon they warm up and get mad, and then they'll really go for it, go for you. So I kind of think I'm kind of like that Gila monster. Somebody turned over my rock, I kind of got mad, and I can't let go. And in doing so, when the public authority turned over my rock last summer, I got a hold of the public authority, and I started doing a lot of questioning, investigating, and what I've been able to do is get what I wanted. I got the material from Mary Sawicki that tells me how the public authority began and all the basic premises for why it's in existence and what the intent all is. And in doing so, I've come up with this idea, and I shared it with Steve a couple of weeks ago, that something that's missing in, I think, the mother lode in general is something I heard you guys talking about, a joint powers of agreement, which could be a public authority entity in the rural counties where it's required to have one, and yet a lot of the money that is spent in a public authority is going towards administration. So if you have 3 administrators and 3 staff in 3 counties that are sucking up all the money, then you don't really have a whole lot of fallout to the masses. And so this is something that I'm going to be proposing today because at 1 o'clock at the library there's an IHSS advisory board, and I am going to present to them the idea of a joint powers of agreement so that not only money will be saved, but efforts can be coordinated in a small rural area, which hasn't been done in the state yet. Everybody's doing their own thing, and it just seems like a big waste of money. So that's one of the resolutions to all this ragging around and grinding away that I've been doing about the public authority and the IHSS, and so I just thought I'd share that with you. So today I will be sharing that with them. Hopefully they'll get onto it because I don't want to do it myself anymore, and I think it's up to higher powers than I, whether it's the IHS Advisory Board, whether it's the Welfare Department, or whether it comes back to the Board of Supervisors to, you know, think of something a little more innovative, a GPA between Tuolumne, Calaveras, Amador, Alpine, I don't know who else, small, but it really might be an answer to the problem that I've been griping about, one of them anyway. So thank you. So,
Thank you, Ms. Miller.
and I just want to, I'm sharing this with the advisory board because they haven't seen it either. So this is new stuff, and it's not secret anymore, not snaky. So thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
Terry Baker from Railroad Flat. I'm here to talk today about the illegal cock ranch again that I've been talking about for the last 4 years, I think, 2 years here. But first thing I'd like to say is I'm here to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. My supervisor, Steve Walensky, is a very, very corrupt and very, very dishonest and very, very sleazy person. He lied to my family and neighbors
If you have
for
things that
over
you
a
would
year
like
and
to
a
address,
half, making us believe that he was helping us. He was only covering his ass from being
Mr.
discovered
Baker, I do not
for
allow...
who and what he really is, a weasel. He has encouraged this problem and has rewarded the convicted
Mr. Baker,
defendant with the
Mr.
ability
Baker,
to
I will
torture
not
their
allow
neighbors with 5
words
times
like
the
that
amount of
in this
noise
boardroom.
that was convicted
This board
in
is now
2000.
going to take a 5-minute recess.
I
on
was
Mr.
okayed by
Baker's
this.
time.
So, Steve
We're
has
taking
now
a
granted
5-minute
immunity
recess.
to the convicted defendant without ever going before a judge. With Steve and his corrupt ways, this county should get rid of the courts, the judges, and the sheriff's department, because we have Steve's justice system, and that system is corrupt as Steve himself. We have in our possession the proof we need to prove to anyone who will listen. We can show anyone the numerous falsified documents from the sheriff's department, backdated court documents, the perjury in court that played a big part in this scam. This has been going on for 4 years now, and we do not want to move from our beautiful property. But Steve has encouraged our neighbors to run us out, just like he ran Kim Angeles and Joe Galt from their home that they spent 10 years building. If you don't believe me, please go to Google.com and click on the word we praise and see what the convicted criminal Carolyn Redmond says about her hero, Steve Walensky, for letting her continue her crime spree and turning our
I'd like to reconvene the meeting, please. If you have some conversations you would like, please go out into the hall. Thank you. And if they're real good conversations, let us know. We'll take another break and join you. I'd like to move back to item 9. Is there anyone else who has an item they'd like to discuss not on the agenda?
Al, you're not going to yell, are you?
I hope I'm treated kindly.
Don't push it.
I'm Al Segala of the Calaveras County Taxpayer Association, and I'd like to share. I've sent our Vice President, Bob Mulvaney, spent some time thinking, which is a very good thing, and he put together 10 suggestions.
We received it, Mr. Segali.
Huh?
We received it.
Well, that's good. Okay, now your public can also get it, and it's good that they also hear these 10 points. The 10 principles, the first one is, this is concerning our general plan update, and the thrust of this is to try to be more property rights friendly.
Just remember, you have 5 minutes, so you might...
You want to start me now?
No, you're now 41 seconds into your comment
Okay.
time.
The first one is the document shall use only common words with precise meanings. The general plan is not a blueprint. It is an ordinance with the force of law, and to be effective, it must be clear, generally understood, and accepted by the public and easily enforced. Such words as sustainability, vision statement, rural character are vague, subject to many interpretations, and therefore unsuitable as legal text. Second, land use regulation should be cumulative, such that any use permitted in a more protected zone be permitted in a less protected zone, thus allowing mixed-use development. Third, in lieu of a list of defined conditional uses, any use not expressly permitted in a particular zone shall be deemed a conditional use subject to the customary approval process. This will allow flexibility, allowing for special or unforeseen situations. Fourth, all existing land uses on a parcel at the time the GPU is adopted shall be deemed permitted uses in perpetuity unless changed under terms of the 6th principle below. Fifth, existing residential neighborhoods shall not be rezoned to accommodate higher densities and or development limits, such as smart growth, except by 2/3 affirmative vote of the property owners in the said neighborhood. 6, variances or amendments to the general plan may be made upon application of a property owner and approval by the customary process. B, when initiated by the county or a public agency with the written consent of property owners involved in an affirmative vote of not less than 4 supervisors, including the supervisor representing the affected districts. By eminent domain, C, under eminent domain, when the property owner is justly compensated for loss of use or reduction in the economic value of his property or other loss due to the amendment. 7th, zoning and variance permits shall automatically take effect within 180 days of application unless denied by the county for clear, well-defined reasons expressed in the general plan. This is practiced successfully in Oregon. Placing the burden of stopping a particular land use on the government eliminates unreasonable long delays. 8th, zoning and conditional use application fees shall be reasonable and should not exceed the reasonable direct costs of the process. 9th, to eliminate duplicity, all zoning and land use ordinances and regulations shall be consolidated within the general plan and should become the sole ordinance governing land use in Calaveras County. 10th, and the last one, the permit application approval process should be simplified, streamlined, clearly defined, and included in the general plan document. This can be found on our website at calaveras.taxpayers.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Segali. Does anyone else have an item that is not on the agenda?
Joe Kelly, would you please clarify as to what you found offensive before you closed down this meeting? You shut off the microphone?
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Kelly.
I don't think that's enough, ma'am. You have public comment here. And Attorney General Bill Lockyer has ruled all agenda items are subject to public comment.
And you were
turned
giving
it
your
around.
public comment, Mr. Kelly.
I have 5 minutes, I believe.
If you would
Do I
like to
not?
talk for 5 minutes, please go
Well,
ahead.
I'm asking questions because you're putting up something that now no one knows what they can say or what they can do up here. I am truly surprised you didn't gavel me. Even though I did no vilification, I spoke the truth and I stated what you stated. I do find it in the past with Mr. Thomas, I've got the gavel. Well, why don't you folks tell us what kind of a county we're in here? Are we in where you're the rulers or our representatives? That's an issue. It's a good thing it's an election year. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any comments they'd like to address to the board on the agenda?
I do.
Yes, Mr.
I would like to make my position clear on this issue of disrespectful behavior. I think that it's a personal affront to me when someone comes to the podium and puts my reputation and my motivations under question. I try to conduct myself with civility and respect, and from my personal point of view, I can't speak for the other board members, but I applaud Supervisor Callaway's or Chairman Callaway's shutting down the meeting to let Mr. Baker talk to himself. It is not in the best interest of this community or this county to have a totally disrespectful interchange in this board. So that concludes my comments on that subject. Thank you.
Mr. Walensky.
As the recipient and subject of the presentation that provoked this, I have a couple of things to say as well. I think people have the right to believe what they believe and think what they think, and in this country say what they have to say. However, the facts may differ from it. However, the emotions may take over a particular moment. I believe people have that right, and it is as close to absolute as, I guess, Frankfurter set some limits on calling fire in a crowded theater. My sense of this is that citizens who expect a functioning democracy have both a set of rights, and free speech is probably the most central to all of our rights, freedom of association being pretty important, and all the Bill of Rights. But with those rights go certain responsibilities. For what we say and what we do to one another ultimately unravels the basis of trust and effective relationships that make a democracy work. So my hope would be not that we would use gavels or regulations, but that we would use courtesy and consideration for others as the basis for our dialogues.
Thank you, Mr. Walensky. I think he said it well enough for all of us.
Can I respond?
No. If there's no other public comment from people who have not spoken, then I am going to move to item 10. We have an item before us, changing the position control list for the administrative office. Ms. Osborne.
Good morning. Francine Osborne, Director of Human Resources and Risk Management. The item before you is a follow-up pursuant to board direction and as part of the offer of employment with our new county administrative officer. At that time, the board committed to additional staff for the administrative office in order to carry out the board's goals and objectives. The county administrative officer has been in the position and has had the time to evaluate the duties and staffing levels necessary for the office. Excuse me, I've had a cold. The request before you today is to downgrade a senior administrative analyst position and fund it at an administrative analyst level, and to create a new chief assistant CAO position. With the economy, the state budget crisis, and the continuing constant budget analyses required, these positions will provide the additional review and depth for the office. However, it is important to point out that it is acknowledged that these are trying times, but the additional staffing for the administrative office needs to be a priority in order to meet the challenges that the county faces not just today, but in the future. This is really an investment in the administrative office, and it's important to their success. If staffing levels are not increased, the existing staff of 3 will be unable to meet the budgetary and administrative needs of the county. The board packet in front of you today is very detailed. It explains and outlines the responsibilities of the office and the positions. It provides justification and rationale as well as the fiscal impact. We are asking the board today to approve a resolution authorizing changes to the position control list for the administrative office as well as a budget transfer. The CAO and myself are available to answer any specific questions you have on this matter.
Okay, are there any questions of Ms. Osborne at this moment? I do, Russ, did you have any? I do want to remind the board that we discussed this thoroughly, the impact, the financial impact on the county when we were interviewing Ms. Boyce for the position of CAO. It was a commitment that we made because of the multitude of tasks that are done in the administrative office. Administration is not what people consider a popular department, but we have numerous items that have fallen in the cracks because we haven't had a complement of staff. I do understand some people want to address this issue, and I want you to know the board is extremely sensitive to what it is that is proposed before us. So, Ms. Osborne, I think I'm going to just, if there's no questions or comments by the board, I'm going to open it up to the public. Thank you.
I have a question. What is the bottom line cost of the measure?
For this year, it was, I believe, $84,000. And Francine, and for the following year, it was $245 all-inclusive.
Correct.
Is that my close?
That's correct.
Yeah,
It does include the new...
245,
Yeah.
all-inclusive.
That's correct.
You're welcome.
Yes, my name's Darrell Rusk. I'm at 101 Melcher Lane, Burson, and I do have a comment on this item.
Could you please speak into the mic, Mr. Rusk? Thank you.
Hello, Mike. Is that better?
Yes, thank
All
you.
right, sorry. Do you wish me to introduce myself again?
No, I
All right.
think we've got it.
The item before the board is one that I agree with and support wholeheartedly. There are many commissions and boards, at least 3 of which I'm on in one capacity or another, and our needs as various commissions for support and various actions on the part of the CAO's office are going to be more demanding in the coming year. And so that's going to add pressure to what is already a very short staff. So, yes, I'm supportive of that.
Thank you, Mr. Rusk.
Jim Turley, representing SEIU. We understand the theory of being short-staffed since this board cut in excess of 70 positions last year, the majority of which belong to SEIU. So we are all dealing with being short-handed and trying to serve the public. To add another $250,000 plus to our expenses via non-general fund charges or general fund charges is not acceptable, when we could basically take the jobs and descriptions that were provided by the CAO and put them out into the different departments. We have qualified engineers, qualified planners, qualified building people. We have code compliance officers. You are going to hear in the next proposal that we have to take another 17.5% cut this coming year. In the realm of 10% layoffs, 7% PERS, and you're going to stand here and vote on increasing staff in one department and turn around and tell the rest of the county that you have to take pay cuts in order to do this. That's ludicrous. That's insane. It's not right. We're all short-staffed. We all have jobs to do, and we do it to the best of our ability. And to look at people and be able to look them in the eye and say, we're going to spend $250,000 of your money to increase staff and then lay people off, not right. Take another look at it. This bait and switch, moving the belts around to make your finances work, won't work anymore. And it goes from the county level to the state level. You have to rethink your position. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Turley.
Good morning, Rosemary Wilson, McLemmy Hill and Church Street. Would it be possible for there to be an explanation in more specifics or even general terms as to what we were not getting done in the past and what we will be able to achieve in terms of services, grant applications, representation to the state, etc., and perhaps have that estimated in some type of monetary sense so that I could better understand the benefits of changing the structure within the county administrative office.
Yes, we will do. That's a fair question.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anyone else have anything else to say? Close the public comment period, and I'm going to bring it back to the board for discussion. I think we could take Ms. Wilson's question first. I can address some of that. Just has happened within the last month. We almost missed out on a grant of $25,000 that was due in 2 days. Just fell through the cracks. That it came into the administrative office, it was not sent out, and just due to being caught by the administrative office, we are receiving funds for energy retrofit for Government Center. We had the new Maloney's letter that had to be addressed right away due to the short time frame. We have the master plan that we're working on, the partnership between the animal shelter, the Humane Society, and the county. The budget has become now a year-round process. We had a last-minute discussions that our CAO had with the state senator Cox and with Assemblyman Berryhill on having the county of Calaveras be included as one that will not, that will receive monies and will not be deferred, like the highway users tax. We had a day to respond to that. These are the type of issues that happen all the time. We had one, just the meeting that we had with the water district that was put together in cooperation between CCWD and Calaveras County. We have oversight of, we meaning the administrative office, when I say that, the board has oversight on everything, is the museum, the archives, the airport, coordinating about the jail, which the administrative office and county council went with the sheriff's office to Sacramento. We now have a team that's working with us on that. So there's a whole host of things that come up that it isn't as if you could. And I understand what Mr. Turley said. I think the board is extremely sensitive to that. We discussed it in great detail when we interviewed Ms. Boyce, because she used to be part of the administrative office. I mean, 10 plus years ago, there were 5 people in the office, and over time, it's down to 2, then 3, and now it's 3. Government, and I wish I could say was easy, it's not. It's become complex, and most of these issues are last minute, and they fall under the jurisdiction of the CAO. I mean, it'd be nice if you could call the planning director and say, go to Sacramento and work on the jail. It's not going to happen. Or to call a code enforcement officer and say, work on the animal shelter. Those are things that have countywide impacts. So I really don't want SEIU or any of the other bargaining units to think that the board is not sensitive to this issue. We are very sensitive to it. We have capital improvement projects that we're working on, the purchasing for the county. The fact that if we don't plan long-term, we're going to get further behind as a county, and we're going to be in deeper problems than we are now. So, you know, it is going to be up to the board. I mean, I know you're asking for a dollar amount to each of these things. You know, that would, I'd have to go back and see how much time do they spend on this, that, and the other. I don't think I can do that. Yes, Rosemary? May I respond? Yes, please.
I know sometimes the organization needs to spend money in order to be able to strengthen their positions when they are competing for funds, and that you may well get more back in return for doing that that would ultimately benefit the county. I woke up this morning to the Channel 3 on the television to see that Calaveras County was one of the was it 9 counties that had been awarded funding from the state, I think, to do with flooding or
It's the presidential declaration of emergency, which allows the county to recoup some of the costs that were incurred during the snow emergency.
And so that is an example, I suspect, of where having high-level administrative people and assistants can work towards the ultimate benefit of the county in representing them better, much in the same way as, I suppose, as Steve Walensky has been able to, and I probably should not just limit it to Steve, but
Yeah,
Steve...
one call out today is enough for me.
District 2, at least, has been able to initiate additional grants and been able to receive funding and benefits from that work. Is that the sort of additional type of work that we could possibly look forward to in expanding or upping the staff or the level of staff within the county office?
Oh.
No, I finished. I had a question mark at the end of that.
Oh, I wasn't sure if that was a period or a question mark.
bit.
Okay. Steve, did you want to respond?
Yes, I would like to respond to that and add to some of your comments. This is a tough issue before us, and the timing couldn't be worse. But we also have to think about how to survive these times and how to deal with both the threats that we face, and I think Marita spoke of those, and you'll see in our next agenda item a plethora of threats. But one of the things that's characterized this county for a number of years is missed opportunities. The question is, who's responsible when the federal government throws literally billions of dollars toward California and it's competitive between counties? Who's shovel ready? Who's got things that are already there and in our plan? When we calculate the cost as well as the benefits, economic benefits of layoffs, do we have an accurate figure, or have we found ourselves through accident thinking that it's all in the savings and that we're not going to pay enormous amounts in unemployment insurance, which offset some of the benefits of or what people might have thought, or policymakers might have thought as the benefits of layoffs? What about CDBG and the funds that we've had and how they've been handled here? And are we effective at both receiving those monies and administering them in a good way? What about the literally millions of dollars that we have lost by not having a housing authority or having somebody managing the housing in this county? Most other counties do that. What about the millions of dollars, literally millions of dollars lost by not having a Parks and Rec district that is capable of applying for and receiving monies? And how about how we're handling the $2.1 million that we got in Prop 40? At some point, you fall below the critical level to administer an operation that's increasingly complex and competitive. And I'll add a couple more things. Most counties have a general services administration. There's somebody actually in charge of building and grounds and dealing with the purchasing and fleet management and the things that we part out to our departments, to great cost and great inefficiency and great pull away from the missions of those departments. Normally, that would be an administrative function in an entirely separate department. In this county, actually, those tasks fall to our three-person administration. I don't see even getting into the game when it comes time to do what really is required, and I believe that the Taxpayers Association has been hammering us on this. You can't have service cuts. You can't justify service cuts unless you've made a county that is the most efficient possible delivery of service that you can get. Is our structure keyed to that? Have we done the greatest efficiencies? And who's going to manage that? Are we asking each department to do this? Or, as we'll find out in the next discussion, does it fall to administration to try to organize the place for service, to deploy our resources not to an inefficient infrastructure, but to streamline it and to make it effective? Now, you could say there's irony in trying to add to an administrative apparatus to fix a broken one. But in my view, who's going to do the work? What level of skills are required to be able to analyze this budget, come up with strategies that can protect services and personnel as best possible under these kinds of economically trying times? I don't think our generation, I don't see a lot of Depression-era people in the room, maybe one or two, but yeah, I thought maybe. but I would have to say that our generation is facing a level of challenge that we're not used to. We've seen expansion almost all our lives, from the 1950s all the way through just a little while ago, with a couple of small glitches in between. This is a moment that's really different, and if we try to pattern ourselves in our approaches without deploying some resource to getting this right, to actually restructuring this, to develop intergovernmental relations, to develop JPAs, as we just heard, to create efficiencies in IHSS, rather than ask one little tidy thing to both administer and provide services, how are we going to develop the JPAs that we're going to need to survive this time? How are we going to develop the interagency, not just the interdepartmental work, but all of the intergovernmental work that will make this government function better to the point of service? To me, and I want to also add that I was the person who voted against the pay increases 4 years ago for administration. And I have always been for chop from the top before you get to the point of service, because it's just, you want people, the whole point of government is to provide service. But if we don't have the capacity, the administrative capacity, to even get to analyze our current circumstance, let alone the administrative acumen to take us from where we are to a different approach to governing, and if the board can't get accurate information on where the finances are here, I'm just not sure how policymakers can get it right. And we have an increasing noise, a rising tide of anger about government. If we are to respond effectively, it's going to take some skills somewhere. And it's going to have to take big picture looks at what's going on. We're not going to solve it department by department. For that reason, I'm breaking my tradition of chop from the top and saying that this proposal before us is not only a good one, but may not be enough. We're downgrading what was a senior administrative analyst position, and my view is we need to upgrade it to a systems analyst, somebody who's got the background to take an entire structure and recalibrate it to today's realities. So I'm not satisfied that this is enough to really get what we need to do done. But in as much as I've already made that argument and lost, I will say that this is the best thing that we could do to try to create the efficiencies that may, in the end, not just save jobs and services, but rekindle some respect from a public that is wondering whether we can do anything well.
Thank you. I closed public comment, but since you're president of SEI, I'll let you do that, Mr.
I do not disagree with you, Supervisor Walensky. All of the opinions of increasing staff are probably very valid. I would question, and I believe the membership would, at what level you increase staff and by how many, and what the final outcome would be. For the 250,000 plus...
Could you speak into the mic, Mr. Herr?
For the 250,000 plus dollars you are proposing to spend, you could hire probably 4, 5, possibly 6 people from a clerical level up to account techs and lesser people. You want to build a management team, you need to have people at a lower level that do the work. You don't want a chief assistant CAO doing the work of a clerk. And in many departments, we have directors, deputy directors, and senior management doing the work that clerical people, that the lower paid echelon, the hard-working people, the educated people that you have hired can do for you as support. You don't need 2 high-level personnel in an already high-level area. You need people that can support that area. You need people that can get the information, analyze the information, give the information to the people that come to this board so you can make rational, educated decisions. You have the staff on board now to do that. You do not need to cut staff. You do not need to cut hours. You need to relook at disseminating the work around the county, move people around. Do not take for granted the talent that you currently have on board. There are other ways to do it. If you want to spend the $250,000 to get support and information and knowledge, use the people you have. Don't abuse them. Thank you.
Thank you. I've given Mr. Turley the courtesy since he's the president, but I've now brought it back to the board. Is there any comments, further comments from the board?
Yeah, I'd like to say a few words. Before coming to the Board of Supervisors here, I spent, you might say, a lifetime in construction, contracting, and in that period of time, I'm going to use a little metaphor here that I used to buy trucks pretty frequently, and I'm thinking of, forgive me, Ginny, but I think that you're a very heavy-duty truck. But in my former
piece.
Yeah, but in my former
Contractor metaphors. Usually we do ag metaphors in this room, but
I learned by bitter experience on a couple of occasions, unfortunately, when you overload a very heavy-duty truck, there are dire consequences to that. You, like Steve said, you can lose opportunities. You can break things. You know, if you have a truck that has like a bobtail that has a load rating of 18,500 pounds on the rear axle, and you put 30,000 pounds on that axle, you're going to break something. You're going to hurt somebody. You're going to it's a violation of common sense. And in many instances, I think that we are overloading our truck genie. I've seen it myself. I've seen situations where you've got less than 24 hours to get a critical response in to keep the door open that will provide financial windfall opportunities in the future. But unless you can get this document in and submitted before the deadline expires, you're just you would certainly lose that opportunity. So I've stood behind Jeannie in her office when I'm sure that she had other things that she should have been doing, but there were only the two of us left to get this thing done before the deadline expired. And I can remember thinking at that time that my goodness, how wonderful it would be if you'd had a little bit of depth in your organization at that particular moment in time, that I wouldn't have had to have been overloading you. And I apologize for overloading you at that particular time. Maybe I helped carry the load for you at that particular moment. But I look at nearby counties. Tuolumne is a good example. I don't know, Francine, you must have done the research on this, and could you give us a comparison? I know the statistic very well because I know the supervisors and their organizational staffing over there, but I think, well, just go ahead and tell us what they have.
I looked at over 15 counties, and I know the board has typically always been interested in our neighbors. What we found when Jeannie and I were looking at this information is that administrative offices have been changing the way that they do business, and part of it has to do with the constant budget deadlines and the constant review and analysis. But looking at the counties, 11 of them had classifications of assistant CAO and deputy CAO. And in Amador, they have a deputy and they have a chief fiscal assistant and officer, and in Tuolumne they have a deputy and an assistant. And then I can provide you all the others. There are numerous counties that actually have an assistant, a chief fiscal assistant officer, and a deputy. Several have 2 assistant executive officers and an executive chief. So that was part of the reason that we took a look at our structure and what was really needed at the high level for those positions, because years ago you didn't see that. Years ago you basically saw a CAO and an assistant and then several levels of analysts. And I think there was reference earlier about the administrative office before, and that is what you had. You had the CAO, you had 3 analysts, an assistant, and then there are offices that have human resources and their staff in there for that additional depth. And part of what happened here is that the administrative office sort of got dismantled over the years, and to a point that didn't keep up with really this changing time that's really before us. But this is what's out in most of the counties, is what you're seeing. You're seeing the high level so that they can be spread out and address all of the different various needs so they don't miss out on anything. Because right now, every dime is important for all counties.
Okay, well, kind of addressing Mr. Turley's concerns, he's, I think, justifiably fearful that if we spend additional monies in the administrative office, that there may be less money available, and most certainly will be less money available for other positions. What, in your view, how realistic is it to move somebody from one of the other departments in to fill these positions? Are we going to attempt to do that?
I actually think that would be a question that would be better for Jeannie to answer with her expertise in the financial arena. I think you can answer it better than I can.
We're going to open the recruitments promotional, so county employees can apply first before we open it up to the general public. So we'll see what applications we get. That would be my intent.
I think he's looking for more fiscal. How are we going to fiscally deal with the cost?
That Mr. Turley said, don't overlook the reality that we may have people in other departments that could fill these jobs. So I just want to make, I wanted to get it clarified that we are going to provide that opportunity for our existing employees.
We will, and we will also open it up. Any position that we open up, we offer to everyone on the laid-off list as well. There are employees that have been placed, but there are still some that are looking for employment. So we will be doing that as well.
Okay. I can come back to some questions if anybody else wants to weigh in.
I don't know. Mr. Tryon, did you have any comments you want to make? Mr. Tuffanelli?
No.
Mr. Thomas, did you want to proceed?
Well, I have to freely admit that there is a little sticker shock associated with the $175,000 total salary and benefit package that would be required for the chief assistant CAO. I would think that, that if we start advertising that position, we'll have a lot of people who would clamor for that. I'm just wondering, how do we come up with that particular salary range and the filling the position at that cost? Is that? I mean, I'm absolutely.
No, that's actually a good question. Whenever we look at salary, especially for new positions, we basically look at 2 things. We look at the internal structure and the external structure. And so we look internally at the department and other positions that are at that level, because that position would be, would cover in the absence of the CAO and the level of responsibility, critical thinking. Then we also go outside and look at other counties and what they actually compensate positions that are similar. And that's how we came up with the salary. So it's a combination of both. It's not overly high compared to other counties. If anything, it's probably on the lower end. Most of the assistants or chiefs in other counties are compensated at a higher rate. And I have those figures if you'd like me to give you those, so you can sort of take a look at them. I think they're done more by monthly amount is how we do it, and then we run the numbers. But this position here is, most of them are somewhere making around 15 grand a month. So this proposal is somewhere between 79. So there's quite a difference, 79 to 96, depending on who applies for the position and what level. This position is not just a set salary. It has a salary range from A to E.
The $15,000 a month you're talking about, that's the total salary and burdens?
That's just the salary.
Just the salary?
Just the salary.
That's
Starting at 13, going to 15. It's also on a range.
So 100.
The typical average is between 10 and 13. Tuolumne County is a good example. They are between 82 and 12, so we're sort of in between that. Amador's a little bit lower, and they only have one set range for this position. It's actually in the appointed salaries.
Okay, so at 82 per month, that would equate to $98,000 annually. And you cited that as being from Tuolumne. What position was that?
Yeah, I have Napa, Stanislaus, Butte, Sutter, Kings, Calaveras, Tuolumne, Amador, San Joaquin. These are some of the counties that got the salaries.
But specifically, what was the position that was, the compensation rate was $8,200 a month in Tuolumne?
That's the assistant CAO, and then the deputy CAO is 79 to 96. They have 2 levels as well.
Okay.
That's where we looked at the structures, because the board typically looks at our neighbors and the compensation.
Thank you, Francine.
You're welcome.
Any other questions or comments, Mr. Thomas? No?
Well, I just heard Francine say that our neighboring county for this position is at approximately $100,000 annually plus the burden. We're proposing to start this position at $126,800. I'm looking for some rational explanation about why we're going $26,000 over what our neighbors are paying.
I can answer that as well. What we did is we didn't want to come in under budget. Obviously, it's a tight budget year. So what we did is, because it's a range A to E, we calculated the position at C step, so that if when we hire somebody at A step, then we would come under the estimation. You never want to under budget for a position. So we calculated it at C step, depending on the level and the position, so that we would come in above that. And between each step is 5%, so that's why you're seeing a higher amount, because from A to E is 20% on our salary range.
So if this goes out for recruitment, you will advertise it at a salary range that would begin at $100,000.
That's right, A to E.
Okay. All right.
But we wanted to make sure that we figured enough income so that as we move into the budget process, we don't end up underfunded for the position.
Okay, thank you very much for your explanation.
Okay, we have the issue before us. I want to remind the board, we did a lot of discussion on this when we were in the interview process with the CAO. We were very concerned about some of the same issues that Mr. Turley brought up. We have looked in depth at the items that we expect the administrative office to be responsible for, many of which Steve alluded to, Francine discussed. It's now time that we take a vote up or down. So if there is still support on the board, based on our prior commitment, I'd entertain a motion.
I will make the motion, but I would also like to comment as I make it.
Of course.
Yes. This is a risky proposition. It's making an investment towards certain ends. The true test of this will be whether the expenditure that is before us will result in savings that are greater than what we're spending. This would be an abject failure otherwise. It's my belief that if we have progress within this year on any of the things we'll be talking about in the next agenda item, but for me, what motivates this motion is what I had earlier referenced as lost opportunities. If we can access the funds that should be coming to this county, and if we can manage them well, this should pay for itself over and over again by multiples. It depends on deployment, it depends on leadership, and I make this motion with the belief that we do have in this office a leader that's prepared to act on those things I just referenced. I would not be making this motion if it were not for that belief and trust. Therefore, Madam Chair, I make this motion to adopt the Human Resources recommendations and approve the resolution.
Do I have a second from a board member?
I would like to second that motion, but it's very important that we emphasize that this $250,000 or $244,000 price tag is the upper limit of what we intend to spend. It conceivably could be $200,000 and no more than that, and I would really encourage every effort to be made to accomplish that savings. I think that we're in a I realize this is kind of a long-winded second, but it
was a long-winded motion, actually. So.
I'm going out I think we're all going out on a limb here to try to accomplish some things with this restructuring, and but this is extremely. I mean, it's a gross understatement to say this is a tough financial situation that we're in. That's a kind of a leap of faith that I'm willing to make at this particular time. So I second the motion.
I have a motion, I have a second, and I have a challenge before the CAO. All in favor?
Aye.
Oppose? Passes on a 5-0. Thank you. And we're taking a 5-minute recess. Meeting back to order. I'm on item 11, please, a resolution endorsing the county's participation in the stimulus Middle Mile Road. I'd like to take item 11 and 12, since for us, when we read it, and I'm sure the public, they're somewhat related. Mr. Stolman.
Thank you, and good morning again. Both items are letters of support for ERA broadband middle mile applications. But I wanted to bring you up to date. When I was first here and addressed you during public comments several weeks ago, we had Alpine and Calaveras as members. Since that time, I've addressed the Economic Development District Board, and their board has formally adopted a position of support, and the Amador County and Tuolumne County boards have as well. So we are now a 4-county coalition supported by the Central Sierra Economic Development District, and they are the applicant for this item. As I said, both of these are middle mile projects. As Supervisor Tryon wanted the efficiencies of working together, they are essentially different middle mile projects. The one that we're proposing, item 11, is a one focused on the four-county region. It will bring middle mile broadband into the region and extend it into Calaveras and Alpine counties. It'll extend it on the Highway 88, the Highway 4, and 108 corridors, and then down into Copper and Valley Springs as well. The advantages to this network, if we're approved, would be that, one, obviously more broadband accessibility for the residents of Calaveras County, and those residents would be served by last mile operators. And as I said, a public comment, Mr. Ben Hewitt is wanting a support for a federal application to do last mile coverage. So his proposal would be bringing it more to the houses and businesses. Ours is to create the infrastructure that would allow that to exist. This is designed for Calaveras County. It will support public safety and connect all four counties in a regional basis to help create that public safety interoperability plan that's been put forth by the Sheriff's Department, as well as extending the broadband into the region. Item number 12, essentially their purpose in presenting this proposal to the government is to connect 14 regional counties up and down the Central Valley. Their primary focus, instead of delivering it into the depths of Calaveras County, Amador and Alpine and Tuolumne, is to connect all of the higher learning and school districts. So they have a different purpose. They do complement one another if they are both funded. Obviously, we would reap the benefit of the fiber that they would put in and be able to expand even further into our region. But they are both designed as standalone projects. The letter that I'm bringing you to from Scenic, item number 12, we'll get a similar letter of support from them as well. So that we are working together, we are supporting each other's applications, but make no doubt about it, these applications do compete with one another as they are through the same federal channel. So they will be seen by the same group of reviewers. We will be in competition for them. So my preference, obviously, is to support item number 11, as that is custom tailored to the four-county region. However, item 12 does bring some benefit. If ours doesn't get approved, that one does get approved, there is still some benefit to the region as well. So working as an advocate for the board, my recommendation is that you support both efforts because either one of them will benefit the county. Obviously, item 11, I think, as custom tailored to the needs of Calaveras County and Alpine Tuolumne and Amador will serve us better. So I'm happy to entertain any questions on either of the items.
Steve. I had the privilege of serving on the Sierra Nevada Conservancy Board in the last 2 years, and we reviewed millions of dollars of applications, and they came from 5 different regions of the Sierra Nevada. Whenever we got 2 proposals, even if they covered different areas, we would take the general thought, and this is just that board, but I'm wondering whether this review will cause the same thing. It appeared that small rural counties that had 4 or 5, sometimes, different proposals, even in the same area, for instance, the water-related proposals from this county, appeared to compete. But what it really said, because collaboration was a high point basis for this, that there was not the level of collaboration necessary to score very highly on that, and therefore some of the Calaveras and Central Sierra proposals failed on that basis. I'm wondering whether collaboration points are important in this process, and whether the fact of competition, even if it's in separate areas, by overlapping interests will defeat both, or could mitigate toward that.
I would never
speculate as to what a group of reviewers would do. Collaboration is one of the components of this grant. Both applications will, by grant policy, reference the other because we're aware of the other grant. We are working together in a spirit of cooperation. However, they are very, very different projects. One has a limited focus on schools and higher education and connecting them with fiber. The other actually reaches out into the community to bring broadband into the community. As many of you know, in our area, we are limited because we don't have access to wholesale internet. We have to backhaul everything, or the ISPs have to backhaul it all into Stockton and Sacramento, and that adds significantly to the cost.
Let me try to be more specific here. Isn't it conceivable that bringing this into the county, deep into the county, could also somehow bring it to the schools that are deep into the county? Isn't that a concept that could be incorporated into a joint proposal, and is it too late?
It is too late to be a joint proposal. However, the concept that you're saying is part of the application. That is the point of cooperation that they are working towards for us. Their proposal only brings it to the County Office of Education. This project would extend it into the community and pick up all of the school districts and the individual schools. So the schools and the school districts are our anchor tenants, the ones that would be served by this project. Their anchor tenants are the County Office of Education and then the local government and the hospital. So we overlap some, and it's not a problem to be anchor tenants in two applications, but ours truly does reach out into the community and pick up those other institutions, and that's how we cooperate with one another.
Are there any other questions?
Mr. Stolman, when I met with Mr. West, I talked about the scenic application, I came away with the understanding that although the thrust of their infrastructure improvements was going to interconnect their very impressive existing infrastructure of the high-speed internet connections, their fiber optics and that. But he also seemed to stress that there would be economic benefits to the region, that that they're going to be bringing all this power in, or the capability in, that it wouldn't be exclusively available to schools, is what I understood. Was I wrong about that? Or?
No, you were not wrong. You were correct. By definition, both applications have to be open. Okay. They have to allow access to the networks. The Calaveras proposal, or the regional proposal, combines fiber optic access and wireless access. So we're actually reaching out onto the mountaintops. Local ISPs would be able to either come to one of the regional fiber optic pops or points of presence, or reach the mountaintops and be able to serve their communities from that. The CNET proposal only does a fiber point of presence at the Office of Education, and the local ISPs would need to make their own way back to that point of presence. So essentially we're allowing the ISPs to reach more citizens for less money. Their model is open and does provide some economic benefit. It just is a little more difficult for the ISPs to get back to Angels Camp.
This is kind of an adjunct to what we're talking about here, but I get the sense that we've had this availability of the internet for a good many years now, but I also get the sense that we're just scratching the surface of its capability. On the way here this morning, I heard about a Cisco announcement. The Cisco Systems was announcing today some revolutionary type of thing that they're unveiling today, that the person who was talking about this for Cisco said that with this new system in place, you could download the entire contents of the Library of Congress in 1 second. That's a pretty impressive statement of fact, but I think that if Calaveras County is going to continue to grow and prosper, it'll be in large part because of the new availability of people to work in their homes and conduct their businesses over the internet. And so, I have no problem supporting both of these applications myself. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Mr. Tryon, did you have any?
No, I do not.
Okay. Mr. Tuffanelli? Mr. Stallman, is there anything else you'd like to add to this?
I would like to agree with Supervisor Thomas. The internet is the wave of the future. We have many departments here who will be changing their business structures to provide those services on the internet. With broadband internet, you now have the ability to download the Library of Congress or to meet with a health professional that perhaps is at UC Davis over a live video link that you could do from the privacy of your home or from a local medical clinic, those kinds of institutions. So the world is going to be an internet, it already is, but it's going to be more and more dependent on high-speed availability of internet access for its people.
Mr. Stallman, how much is this grant, the value of this grant for the 4 counties?
We're still working on the budget. At this point, it stands somewhere in the $15 million range. There is a 20% match. The match is being is an in-kind match for services rendered from our consultants and from our staff, as well as private contributions from our business partners. So this is a public-private endeavor. We have 3 local telephone companies involved in this endeavor, and they are making infrastructure and cash available for the matching part of this grant.
Okay, thank you for your 3 months of total dedication to this. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Segali and any other member of the public who would like to address item 11 and 12.
Yeah, actually, just touched on my question. What is the effect on the taxpayer? Are we going to use public money, tax money for this? I just heard that there's a grant that's happening there. Is that grant coming from government sources? Is it
Federal
from the federal
government,
from the federal
stimulus
government?
money.
And the federal government is not very stable.
Then we might not get the grant.
And what is the effect on for our local taxpayers?
That's a good question. Mr. Stallman, did you want to answer Mr. Seals?
The grant is a federal stimulus grant. I would never suppose to argue the financial position of our country, but the grant is already out there. Money is going to be spent. I think we would be remiss in not trying to get a cut of that for Calaveras County. As to the local taxpayers, this will have no impact other than staff time that's already invested and presumably will be invested a little bit more as we go forward. The network will become a private or maintained by a private company and managed by a public agency. So the only effect to the local taxpayer would be a commitment to staffing meetings and going forward with some GIS and that kind of stuff. But it's really minimal.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Good morning, Bill Schmidt from Mountain Ranch. As I look around the county to see where broadband is delivered and where it's not, amazingly enough, I find myself in the middle of the information superhighway wasteland. Customers served by Volcano Telephone and Calaveras Telephone have access right now to broadband. Valley Springs through the cable company, San Andreas, Angels Camp, I believe Arnold, all these places have broadband availability, and I understand the middle mile concept and the last mile concept. Part of the justification for this money is that 26% of the county is either underserved or not served by broadband, and that's all well and good. I don't see this doing anything to change that. My own internet service is provided by a private individual who has bought or leases 4 T1 lines from the phone company. It also has a microwave link from Stockton to Sierra Vista, Quiggs Mountain, which he then distributes wirelessly. It's a wonderful thing. It beats the heck out of broadband. You know, I guess I'm a little concerned. You know, the most terrifying words can be, I'm from the government and I'm here to help. You know, the connectivity, like Mr. Stoll was talking about the backhaul and stuff like that. We're all for better internet service and a big pipe, but there's, I'd sort of like to have it explained to me exactly how this is going to eventually cure that 26% thing. Also in the board packet, it was talking about, or in your resolution, it talks about public safety, and as a member of the board of Central Fire, we're also public safety, and I don't see us being served except in Glencoe. We have the ability to have broadband by Volcano Telephone, but everywhere else throughout our district, there's not much addressing it. I'm not aware of what might be addressed to make sure that fire is included, because in this county, at least, even though OES is run through the sheriff's department, most of our major emergencies are fire-related rather than flood or whatever, any other thing that might be a sheriff's department thing. So those are just my concerns.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or concerns?
Just following on from my neighbor Bill, it was mentioned that the services would come up Highway 88 and 4, and I was wondering about Highway 26 and Mountain Ranch Road, that area. Would there be coverage? And I mean, would that depend on line of sight? I'm not too familiar with whether that area would be covered by Highway 88 or Highway 4. Somehow I doubt it, but that would be my question.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Mr. Stallman, could you please address?
I agree with the speaker's comments. There presently is no service, and the fire districts are considered anchor tenants and public safety, so the intent is to be able to provide service to them as well. The network does go up Highway 88. It's using a combination of fiber and microwave. It also goes up Highway 26, Highway 4, and 108, and along Highway 49. So there are multiple places where we're serving it by fiber, where the intent is to serve it with fiber optics, and then the rest of it is to serve it with microwave. We are anticipating that we're designing a network as a 3 gigabit backbone, so very fast and robust. The local internet provider that's on Quiggs's Mountain right now is in support of this. It will bring his cost down. He will be able to, instead of backhauling microwave to Stockton, he'll be able to pick it up right at Quiggs Mountain. So it'll lessen the expense that he has to pay for his bandwidth, and he'll be able to pick up more bandwidth for less money right there. The theory is now the local internet providers can reach out and get to their customers in a more efficient manner.
Thank you. If there's no other public comment or questions, I'm going to bring this back to the board. Do any of the board members?
Mr. Schmidt
Yes.
had one.
Yes. Right now, a lot of the county is served telephone-wise by AT&T, and you know, in the more remote areas, in order to deliver a DSL signal, they're able to put remote terminals in the ground that basically take a fiber optic cable and then distribute it through a neighborhood and stuff like that. I'm just wondering if there's any thing in that program for not that I'm out here to, get tax money for AT&T, but if there's some way to distribute that in the neighborhood too.
The plan as is designed now does not call for AT&T DSL redistribution. The position of our group is that AT&T has had ample opportunity to do that on their own and has yet failed to deliver that service. DSL can be made available, but part of the DSL dilemma is, again, getting it connected to the wholesale part. So I don't believe, and I don't know this to be true, I don't believe that Mountain Ranch has the capability of providing 3 gigabits back to the internet, even if it was to deploy DSL on a more regional or localized basis. So our intent is again, to reach out and make that bandwidth available in the Mountain Ranch, in the unserved areas. It is not just to beef up what's already being served.
Okay, thank you. Bring it back to the board for any further comments. Oh, you're welcome to call Howard. I've had several of my constituents I've stuck on him. Any other comments? For the Ebbets Pass corridor, this is really most welcome. I have many people who work in Ebbets Pass or who would like to stay. They might be part-timers. They would like to live up here, but because of the type of reception they have, they can't. And I have whole pockets of communities wanting this kind of service. And I'm just happy that we're this far along in the process. The Greater Arnold Business Association has written a letter of support. I'm hoping the Calaveras Chamber would. The letters are due in by the 11th of March, Mr. Stolman? If there are.
Yes, there was a 2-week extension, so we have a little bit of grace.
So any of you are members of groups that would like to write letters of support, it would be greatly appreciated. You could do your letters to Howard or directly to the federal government. We'll get you the name and address. If there's no other comments from the board, I will take item 11 and 12 together, unless board members would like them done separately.
Chairman Callaway, or Chairperson Callaway, I'd like to make a motion on 11 first. It differs slightly from the other one, but
yeah, it does.
I move that we approve the attached resolution endorsing Calaveras County's participation in the Central Sierra Economic Development District's middle mile broadband project, and we authorize the board chair to sign a letter of support.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes on a 5-0. Item 12, Mr. Thomas.
Okay, on this one, I recommend, or I move that the board approve a minute order authorizing the board chair to sign a letter of support for the Scenics possessive Central Valley Next Generation Broadband Infrastructure Plan.
A second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Passes on a 5-0. Thank you. I'd like to move to item 13, review for correspondence, et cetera. Mr. Tryon, you've been so quiet. Thank you, God. And would you like to start, please?
Now you poked him.
Don't provoke him.
I have nothing to bring before the board, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Walensky.
I have, tomorrow I'll be attending the First Five Conference in Sacramento. I have a CHIPS board meeting that evening and the Friends of Railroad Flats School meeting after that. On Friday, I have the Behavioral Health Jobs Club meeting and gathering. We have a meeting with Head Start at noon, and at 3 o'clock, the JPA Child Support And by the way, Marita, I don't know if we've got a location yet. I haven't seen that. But it's either in the library or at CalWorks. As that
It's at the
last
library.
information. Okay, at the library. And I'm going on Saturday to the Planning Department's General Plan meeting in Railroad Flat from 11 to 1 at the Railroad Flat Community Hall.
Mr. Toffenelli.
I have down on my calendar the 10th tomorrow, Wednesday, tomorrow, from 10 to 12, a camera meeting.
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, I forgot to call that out, but I'm looking for a substitute because I'll be at the first 5.
That's the Calaveras, Amador, McCallum River Authority, Joint Powers Authority. I'll be attending that. That's at CCWD's boardroom from 10 to 12 tomorrow. On Friday, I will be in San Andreas at the Town Hall from 6:30 to 8:30. George, is that correct? 6:30 to 8:30 for the General Plan Workshop in District 1 in San Andreas. I will also be Monday attending a public workshop for the Highway 1226 intersection improvement project. That starts at 6 and it goes till 8 p.m. and it's at the Jenny Lynn Elementary School multi-purpose room in Jenny Lynn. Actually, Rancho Calaveras. And that concludes
Mr.
my
Thomas.
program.
All right. Tomorrow morning at 10:30, I've been asked to attend a meeting with Steve Andres with the Mountain Valley Emergency Services to discuss some contract language in the ambulance contract that would allow Copperopolis Fire District to do transports in certain instances. Okay, and then let's see. I will also be attending the town hall meeting that Supervisor Toffenelli mentioned in San Andreas on Friday, as well as the public workshop for the intersection discussion on Monday. Since this is inclusive of items of concern, I just wonder if the other board members got a letter from Fish and Game about the declaration of that yellow-legged frog as an endangered species. That that's the Center for Biological Diversity. I mean, I just have this fear that if we don't let things like that, if we just let them go unchallenged, that our recreational economy here, as it relates to the fishing, the opportunities for trout fishing and everything, that this group, and did you meet with them on the bio plant?
Not yet, actually. They're in Arizona, and we're going to be headed down there to try to engage them in a little bit of a debate on forest practices.
I really don't get it. It's almost like if we don't jump up and say, wait a minute, you can't do this to us. I mean, does anybody else feel like that we're being steamrolled or rolled over by a small group of environmentalists from Arizona? Just bothers me a lot.
In terms of Calaveras County, the Fish and Game Commission has been working with the California Fish and Game Commission. They've been doing the environmental assessments on each of our waterways to see if we can still stock. And the priorities have been shads, white pines, and angels. And they're going to be moving up the mountain. So we have been working with them closely as a local Fish and Game Commission.
Well, I regard that as, it's a totally necessary effort, but it's reactionary. I mean, completely reacting to the ramifications of this group's action. I don't know exactly what to do about it, but I just am not content to be silent about their attack, on our region. So I don't know. I'm maybe tilting at windmills, but I just don't like it.
Well, Gary?
Are you done?
Yeah, I'm done.
Are you done on this subject?
Actually, I have one small addition. It seems to me that we have, in the Sierra, have had a number of different moments where the relationships between local groups, and I'm including environmental groups in that, and people who are thinking in sort of more abstract and far away terms have come into some conflict about how to do best stewardship practices in each of our communities. And this is, one could take a look at it as a legal issue, as many of the folks from way out of town do, or you could take a look at it as a relational and best practices issue and something based in science, which most of the local people have come to some accommodation and figured things out. Quincy Library Group was one such example where people did get together, and then ultimately, while local environmental groups and timber operators and logging interests got together and had a plan, there were national organizations that interceded in a legal, in a litigious kind of mode. In my view, the best way to prevent these things from becoming long-term and almost targeted conflicts is to try to develop better relationships so that people can actually learn what's going on here. An example would be Forest Legacy, which had filed lawsuits in relation to the Quincy project, was invited with their biologists to come to District 2 and take a look at the forest and the condition of the forest, which are really not exactly what you might think of from Arizona or far, far away. You might think of them as pretty, pristine, beautiful forests, but in fact they have been logged. They're overgrown. A good portion of it's in plantations. They are now unhealthy and pose not only fire danger, but biological. They in fact are biological catastrophes. So if you apply science, as finally Forest Legacy did, they now are supporters of projects that are going on to do thinning and restoration work on the watershed and in the national forests and BLM. So lawsuits dropped, new relationships develop, and they're involved in monitoring and making the plans to do the restoration work. I think the Center for Biological Diversity has been too far away to really be able to judge what's going on here, and so my hope is that given a close-up look at the facts on the ground, that they will come to the same conclusions that many local environmental groups have, and that we'll find ways to get along and agree. Some people tell me that's a long shot, but I think that's the best thing we can do affirmatively, is try to develop fact-based relationships and a good exchange of information.
When are you going to go see them?
Well, we've got the...
And will they see you?
Well, I plan to drop in, but we're also, we've sent an invitation for their biologists to come and visit our area, but we're also hoping to meet with them first so that we can outline what's really happening here.
I applaud that
Anybody
effort.
wishing to join would be most welcome.
I'd like to be there.
Okay,
I have one correction. The camera meeting, I've been given an agenda, it's the 17th. It's not this Wednesday, it's the following Wednesday.
So I withdraw my request for a substitute.
Okay.
I had it as the 10th for some reason. Maybe originally it was the 10th, but it's been changed.
They're going to meet on St. Patrick's Day?
I have with Steve Central Sierra Child Support on Friday. I have a conflict. I'm hoping someone could attend that meeting. Russ, you're the alternate. Can you attend? It should be a short meeting. It said 3 o'clock in the library here in San Andreas.
And say again what that...
Central Sierra Child Support Agency.
Yes, I can do that.
Got it. Thank you. Could you give me that packet? I appreciate it. Ms. Boyce?
Just a couple of items regarding the state budget. The good news for Calaveras County is that the governor has actually signed the cash management deferral bill, which provides an exemption for counties under $50,000 and 50,000 in population. So that's really good news for us in terms of our cash flow. So the state will hold on to our money that we had anticipated they might hold on to for social services and transportation. There has been an alternative gas tax swap. 2 bills have gone to the governor for signature. It's unclear whether or not he will sign them. It eliminates the sales tax on gasoline, except for diesel, and replaces those with an increase in excise tax. It will protect some funding for local roads and streets, as well as transit. There's some debate as to whether the governor will sign it or not, because it does not include language which would provide savings to Prop 98 that he would like to see. So we'll see whether or not, and maybe Tom Garcia has some more information about that. There have been 2 court rulings this week, one with regards to the Medi-Cal provider rate cuts and the in-home supportive services wage cuts that the Schwarzenegger administration implemented last year, or tried to, as part of the budget process. The U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals, the 9th District, has prohibited the state from cutting the 5% from the provider rates for Medi-Cal. This has been an ongoing issue with cutting Medi-Cal rates for years. It's, every year it's tried, and it's usually thrown out by the courts. So once again, the governor plans to appeal that, but for now, there will not be an additional 5% rate cut to Medi-Cal providers, including adult day health care hospitals and pharmacies. The other ruling had to do with the in-home supportive services. The governor had proposed to reduce the state share of the in-home supportive services provider wages from $12.10 an hour to $9.50, and that was also thrown out by the court. Schwarzenegger, again, has expressed his desire to appeal that. The governor did win a little victory on his blue pencils of child welfare services and other funding. Essentially, he had cut an additional amount from the budget once the budget was proposed, and the Senate Democrats had challenged that additional reduction. It was about $200 million in state cuts. The court has ruled that the governor does have that authority, and so those cuts will remain. So those are just the few things that are happening on the front that add and detract from the state budget deficit, and we'll see how it all pans out, I think, after the
process. And I'd like to say I wish we didn't have to do this. We didn't have to listen. But I think it's appropriate that all of us know where we are now in terms of county revenues and expenditures. And I'm going to just turn it over to Ms. Boyce to introduce the topic for us.
Well, before you have the mid-year financial report, and thanks very much to the departments and their fiscal staff who provided some data to the administrative office as they scrutinize their revenue and expenditures. And the purpose of this report is really to take a look at the first 6 months of the fiscal year and see whether we're on track as to where we would expect to be at mid-year or not. If there are trends that suggest that we may have some issues with our currently adopted fiscal year 09-10 budget, what we will be facing as we look forward to the fiscal year 10-11 budget. So what we did was we put together a report that kind of spelled out some of the agonizing decisions that were made last year by the board with the help of the workforce and the labor unions, and it was a tough year. There were concessions, there were eliminations of positions, there were deletions of positions, there were people who left for early retirement, and we're going to be facing some of those same options again this year, unfortunately, due to the deficit we're looking at. We're going to go through a slide presentation. We tried to pick out the bullets from the report that all of you have or have access to on the website. We'll take a look at how the budget was adopted in the fall. our revenues, expenditures, non-general funds, talk a little bit about the state budget as best we know it. We know all of you who are involved with any state funding know that every day is a new day on the state front, and there are no guarantees that there won't be additional cuts. In fact, we expect additional cuts on the state front once the state decides to deal with the ongoing budget deficit. We will ask the board for direction in the current year because we are facing what we expect to be a cash revenue shortfall, and also direction as we go forward to develop the budgets for next fiscal year. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Shirley Ryan, who has done this presentation, I think, for the board several years in a row.
Thank you, Jeannie. Needless to say, the preparation of last year's budget, or the current year's budget, I should say, 910, it was challenging. A few years ago, I sat before the board and made the comment that we were in recession, and unfortunately, that proved true. And many have stated in newspapers that it's been the worst recession since the Great Depression. I know that's a phrase I've heard numerous times. When we were looking at preparing the budget, we were facing over a $1.3 million decrease in the cash carry for prior year. We went from in excess of $1.5 million to $183,000. Additionally, we were facing a 3.31 decrease to assessed property tax rolls, over $3 million in general fund revenues, and impacts that were put upon us by the state, including Prop 1A suspension, which meant the state could borrow up to 8% of property taxes and pay those within 3 years. Fortunately, when the state did adopt that as part of the budget, they also gave us the mechanism to securitize at no cost to the counties so that we would not, in fact, lose that $1.5 million for 3 years. So what did we do to try and balance that budget? Because we were facing some pretty significant shortfalls between the decrease in cash carry and revenues going down. We asked departments to submit a number of budgets, quickly realized that, especially if Prop 1A was suspended, we would be looking at a 7.5% reduction to the general fund contributions for all county departments. And so as departments looked at what they could do, making the cuts to services and supplies where they could, eliminating capital purchases, we also realized that 69, almost 70 positions were held, that were vacant at 7109 to help with the savings. 41.3 of those went unfunded, and 28.5 of those positions were actually eliminated off the position control list. We had 7 employees countywide that opted for the retirement incentive that was offered by the Board of Supervisors last year. And for 910, 21 employees were laid off, and 5 employees took a 50% reduction in time. And those layoffs and reduction in time netted the general fund a savings of a little over $500,000, and non-general fund in excess of $1 million. We also had concessions from public safety bargaining units, the DSA, the Calaveras County Public Safety Employees Association, sorry, it's a mouthful. The CCP-SEA agreed to pay 5.6% of the PERS employee contribution. The Sheriff's Management agreed to pay 7% of the employee PERS contribution for a total savings of almost $431,000. In addition, the Sheriff contributed over $347,000 in AB 443 funds, and the boards allocated an additional $107,000 in VLF funds to make this all work, to save those positions. So what that meant was we had a general fund budget of nearly $59 million. However, part of that was related to jail construction costs and the jail bond. In fact, $20 million of it was directly related as that money moved through the general fund out to capital projects. So if you remove that $20 million, that kind of skews it. The adjusted general fund budget was $38,923,000. That was a decrease of $3.5 million, or 8.3% over the prior year. The general fund cash carry was down to 183, which is an 88% decrease over the prior fiscal year's cash carry of 1.3 million. We included contingencies of 450,000, and additionally the board budgeted a transfer to increase general fund reserves in the amount of 507,000. So when we're looking at mid-year, we're looking at the county finances. We're reviewing expenditures and revenues to look at current trends, to see what that means at mid-year, not only at mid-year, but at fiscal year end. So we have some idea where we're going to end up. We asked departments to do detailed analysis of their budgets, giving us projections of where they think their revenue is going to be at fiscal year end, and we can see where it is at mid-year. But we wanted to know what they thought was going to impact their budgets, both in revenues and expenditures, and what that status would be come fiscal year end. We also looked at a number of economic indicators that tells us how the economy is doing in affecting our revenue streams. And we're continuing to monitor the state fiscal crisis, which is ever-changing. So in a perfect world, mid-year revenues and expenditures would be at 50% at 12/31. However, it's less than a perfect world. So the revenues that we've received to date are about $14.5 million, or 37% of where we would expect to be. Expenditures we've incurred are $18.7 million, or 46.8% of where we would expect to be. And we've outspent the revenues received by about $4.2 million. However, that's not unusual in the first half of the year for a number of reasons. So what are some of those reasons? Well, as you know, property taxes come in December, and they also come in April. The VOF revenues come in January, and they come in May. So you're going to be missing those revenues the first half of the year. The same with tobacco settlement money. That comes in the second half of the year, as does the sales and use and lieu fees, franchise fees, and some other revenues that we only see in the second half of the year. We're also seeing delays in state and federal allocations and grant reimbursements, meaning the state's taking longer to reimburse those grants that we have with the state, and their reimbursable grants. We have to incur the expenses first, then apply to have them reimbursed by the state. Due to economic conditions, the interest earned is not what we expected, and so we're seeing decreases there. Our expenditures are higher because most of our insurance premiums, with the exception of unemployment insurance premiums, are paid in the first month of the fiscal year in July. Unemployment is paid quarterly. And transfers to and from designated funds either occur as the revenues come in, or the expenditures occur, or they occur as a whole at fiscal year. So that also would impact whether or not we are showing 50% of revenues and expenditures. But not all good news. If county fiscal trends continue in taking into those revenues that come into the second half of the year and the expenses that occurred in the first half of the year, we feel that the revenues are projected to be about a little over $1 million less than what we had hoped they would be for this fiscal year. Fortunately, expenditures are also down, according to the department's reports, of $366,000, for an estimated loss to the general fund of over $700,000. Now, we do have $450,000 in contingencies and money set aside to transfer to reserves, and we'll kind of talk about that a little bit later. So what are we looking at in the way of highlighting our revenues? Well, in the unassigned revenues, which are in your non-departmental budgets, is the secured property taxes. I asked the auditor's office to provide me or our office with an update on property tax revenues for the second half of the year, and based on their projections, They think the revenues will actually, for current secured, will be about $94,000 higher than was budgeted. Unfortunately, that's offset by your current supplemental secured taxes, which will go down by $80,000. Franchise fees, we've received one for cable TV, and that is $10,000 higher than we expected. We have not yet received the franchise fees for PG&E, but we feel that they will come in at least at what we had budgeted. Vehicle license fees, or VLF, is decreasing over $162,000, and interest earned for the general fund, a decrease of $170,000. In looking at economic indicators and consumer spending, the National Bureau of Economic Research announced in, I think it was December of 2008, that we were in fact in a recession and had been since 2007. While many economists believe that the severe global recession is ending, it's going to be a slow recovery. Real estate and construction, the markets are still weak. Retail sales are very sluggish. Unemployment remains high, and the feeling is there will be no significant decline in unemployment until consumer confidence returns and starts buying at a higher level. Everything that I've read and the projections I see are for a slow recovery over a number of years. Nationwide unemployment in December 2009, the unemployment rate was 10%, reflecting a job market struggling to recover. The state's unemployment rate was 12.4, with the county's at 15.2. That's the high. I went back through EDD's records to find out when our county's unemployment rate was that high, and last time was March of '93. And there's an 18-month graph of what unemployment rates have done, the red one being the county, the blue the state, and the green one the national. As you can see, it's been a pretty steady climb. So property taxes, at one point we were seeing a strong real estate market with a lot of growth, and as a result our property tax rolls were growing at double digits, 11, 12%, one year I think it was 17%. And that means that our revenues grew for the current secured taxes. In 05-06 it grew by $1.3 million, in 06-07 by $2.1 million, in 07-08 by $1.3 million. And then we saw a very small increase of 0.79% to the rolls in 08-09, which really grew the revenue only $118,000. The 2009 assessed rolls declined 3.31% for a decrease in current secured revenues of about $586,000. The assessors projecting a 7 to 10% decline in the assessed property tax rolls for 2010, and that if it decreases by 10%, we're looking at $1 million decline in revenue. So consumer spending revenue projections. The sales and use tax, we're doing a little bit better than we projected in the budget, and our projections were, and we tried to be very conservative given what the trends were. We looked at those trends carefully. So our projections in the 9-10 budget were based on those trends. And the sales and use tax, we're projected to receive about $50,000 more than we budgeted. However, that's a 5.8% decrease from 08-09, and it's a 32.9% decrease from our 5-year high in fiscal year 06-07, a decrease of nearly $957,000. Prop 172, public safety, which is based on statewide sales tax, it's projected to receive about $50,000 less than we budgeted, kind of offsetting there. Again, it's a almost a 13.5% decrease from 08-09, and a 24.7% decrease from a 5-year high in 07-08. For a loss of about $441,000. The TRT, we're projected to receive a little bit less, about $24,000 less than budgeted, but that will still be a slight increase over 08-09 of about $7,000. And but it's a 9.5% decrease from the 5-year high in 0506 was nearly $40,000. And as you know, the GOT goes, a portion stays in the general fund, a portion goes to road, and a portion goes to tourism via the Visitors Bureau. Property transfer taxes, we're on target to receive what was budgeted. And that's a slight increase over 0809, but it's a nearly 70% decrease from the 5-year high in 0506 of nearly $700,000. And there's kind of a chart that pretty much says the revenues. We saw good revenues in 05, 06. They were climbing. And in 07, 08, with the beginning of the recession, they started dropping off. Construction development is another indicator of how the economy is doing. And unfortunately, those markets are still weak. The building permit fees are on target for this year. Again, it was a conservative estimate. It's if we meet that target, it will be a very slight decrease over 0809 of less than 1%. But if you look at fiscal year 0506, it's down nearly 64%, nearly $1.3 million. Sewage system application fees, we're expecting about $11,000 more than budgeted, and that's a slight increase over 0809. But again, it's a decrease of nearly 58% from a high in 0506, or almost $190,000. Printing application fees, again, we're on target for the year. However, this is a 23% decrease over last year and a 75% decrease over the high in 0506. And once again, a graph of the 5-year trends for bill fees, sewage fees, and printing application fees. And from where they were in 05, 06 to where we currently are is a pretty significant difference. Realignment sales tax and VOF. So far, we've received 45% of the $119,000 that was budgeted. Realignment revenues are again tied to consumer spending. Timber tax, we're about 8% of where we would expect to be, or $4,000 out of $60,000. This is one of the most difficult revenues to project. The years we project low, we get more money. The years we project what we got the prior year, it drops down. There's no real rhyme or reason. Well, there is, but rural and small county law enforcement, the AB 443 money. Prior to this fiscal year, it was a single allocation of $500,000 that was received in the beginning of the year. With the adoption of the state budget, the funding mechanism for this changed slightly, and the increase to the VLF, a portion of that went into a local public safety and protection account, out of which the AB 443 funds are paid. At 12/31, we'd only received one quarter's payment of about $90,000. I think it was maybe 96. And we have since the end of since mid-year received a second quarter's payment of about $106,000, and we will at least receive the third quarter prior to the end of the fiscal year. So what are the expenditures doing? And we kind of categorize this by function, and we'll start with land use. The building department is 42% expended, or $450,000 of a little over $1 million budgeted. And some of the things that have affect this is those transfers to designated fund. The money that comes in for nuisance abatement that is budgeted as a transfer out, and that usually happens towards the end of the year. It's a need-based department, not supported by general fund. The planning department is about 33% expended, or $611,000 of the $1.8 million budget. Again, the decreases are in transfers to designated funds. Money comes in for environmental impact report contracts. Those money are transferred out to the designated funds. Then as those expenditures occurs, the money comes back in from the designated fund. So if the revenues are down for EIR reports, then the expenditure is also down. Also, the general plan update budgeted costs that were not 50% expended at mid-year are expected to be fully expended by fiscal year end. On-site sewage is about 33% expended, or $103,000 of $311,000 budgeted, and there's salary savings due to unfilled and budgeted positions. Environmental health, which included agricultural and environmental management, collectively are about 50% expended, so they're about where they would be expected to be. The Sheriff's Department budget we looked at as a whole. Sheriff's Operations, Dispatch, CNU, Marine Safety, Jail, CalMet, OES, and Animal Services. And collectively, 41% has been expended, or a little over $5.8 million of a $14 million budgeted. Now, this budget also includes the appropriations for RIMS software, NDT, and the microwave project. So those are capital project costs and may account for some of being under 50%, shall we say. Also, in the report from the Sheriff's Department, there was a plan by OES to freeze major grant expenditures, allowing the reimbursement of those grants to catch up so that there's not a severe impact to the general fund cash carry at year end. In probation, they're 52% expended, or over $1 million of a $2 million budget. Again, there was the chief probation officer retired, requiring a payout, and this was done prior to mid-year, so accounting for a little bit over 50% expended at that point in time. The district attorney's office includes the DA victim witness, and child abuse vertical prosecution grant. They are about 50% expended, or $131,000 of $1.6 million. The one note on this budget is that we learned that the child abuse vertical prosecution grant will receive $22,500 less than expected. However, the district attorney believes that he can make up or offset that decrease in revenue with salary savings. The coroner is 61% expended, or $96,000 of $156,000 budget, and we'll be looking for a mid-year budget adjustment of approximately $40,000. This is tied directly to professional and specialized services autopsies. And when I looked at it at mid-year, I thought, oh, well, he can make it to the third quarter. Unfortunately, when I looked at the account summaries at the coroner's request, he has about $6,000 left in that line item, so we will be looking to the board to increase that line item as part of budget adjustments when we return to the board of those budget adjustments. Finance administration includes the Board of Supervisors budget, the CAO's office, assessor, auditor controller, human resources, treasurer tax collector, technology services, GIS, and county council. And collectively, we are 48% expended, or nearly $3.1 million of a $6.5 million budget. There will be mid-year budget adjustments requested of about $40,000 to cover the cost of the outgoing CAO's payout and the interim CAO portion, as well as a budget adjustment based on the board action that was taken earlier today. Insurance, the insurance is 72% expended, or $1.8 million of a $2.6 million budget. Now, this is not unusual, as I mentioned earlier. Premiums are paid at the beginning of the year, and those are some pretty significant premiums: workers' comp, property insurance premiums, and quarterly unemployment insurance costs. We're watching those very, very closely. Those are increasing. We believe that we have some savings in our workers' comp premium to cover some of that. HR and risk management is watching those premiums closely to make sure that it doesn't spike unexpectedly. As you know, because of COBRA and extensions and the extension of time allotted that people can collect unemployment benefits, those costs go up.
Shirley, before you leave that, may I just ask a quick question? I thought when the federal government extended all the unemployment benefits that the federal government was paying the cost of those extensions. What you're saying is that no, either the private companies or whatever the entity is that from which they were laid off are paying it?
They reimburse the cost of COBRA, not of unemployment.
Okay.
The clerk recorder elections budget was 33% expended, $456,000 of a nearly $1.4 million budget. And educational, recreation, and cultural, that's your library, your Calaveras adult tutoring, farm advisor, and the museum is about 49% expended. County contributions, this is the transfer out to non-general fund departments, is about 9% expended, or $2 million of $23 million, but remember, the $23 million includes $20 million for capital projects for jail construction. Also, the transfers for roads for VLF and occur when the revenue is posted in the general fund in January and May. General fund contingencies as of 12/31/09. There were no draws on contingencies. The $450,000 was still balanced. However, as I mentioned, as I was going through the expenditures, the coroner is requesting an additional appropriation, as is the county administrative office. Also, it may be needed to cover shortfalls if we land where we expect to land at the end of the fiscal year. The general fund reserves, the board, at direction at final budget, included a transfer to increase reserves of a little over $500,000. That would occur at the end of the fiscal year, and again, that may be needed to address the revenue shortfall. And I'm just going to briefly go through the non-general fund departments. Public Works, I kind of lumped them together because administration and the Equipment Service Center has expenditures in them. They're offset by charges out to their other departments for their services. So it was easier just to include administration, land development, Equipment Service Center, and roads all in one budget. One total. Cash carry 6/30/09 was nearly $3.3 million. At mid-year, their revenues they've received has been about 15.3%, and they've expended about 24.6%, with mid-year expenditures receiving revenues by about $1.9 million. The money that received from the general fund is tied to TOT and VLF. Otherwise, the money comes through the state. Integrated Waste Management, their cash carry at 6/30/09 was $709,000. Their mid-year revenues are running about 36.7%, with expenditures at 31.8% of what was budgeted. That means mid-year revenues exceeded expenditures by $139,000. They are, when we return to the board with the budget adjustments tied to mid-year, they will have some budget adjustments to increase revenues and expenditures, but there is no general fund contribution to integrated waste management. CalWorks and Human Services, their cash carry at 6/30/09 was $998,000. At mid-year, they've received 49.3% of their budgeted revenues, and they've expended 43.5% of what was budgeted. Mid-year revenues exceeded expenditures by about $366,000. The general fund contributions for the county share of their programs are $465,000 for fiscal year 09-10. They also will be looking at mid-year budget adjustments, increasing revenues and expenditures, and this has to do with the med security, the rapid rehousing, the temporary aid to needy families, subsidized employment programs. The revenues will offset the expenditures, and there will be no general fund cost. One of the things in the general budget is looking at deep cuts in safety net programs, especially if he does not get the federal funding, that additional federal funding that he is looking for. And his budget proposal included an additional trigger cut should that money not come through. And at this point, it's really too hard to say what all that means because we still have a long way to go before we have an adopted budget. And at this point, the legislature was willing to make any reductions until after May revise. In the public authority, they have a negative cash balance at 6/30/09, and this just has to do with the way the funding comes in for the public authority. They have to incur the cost and then reimburse it. At mid-year, they've received 25% of expected revenues, and they've expended about 44% of what was budgeted. And again, it has to do with the reimbursement and claiming. They claim on a quarterly basis, and it comes in once those claims are submitted. Expenditures have exceeded revenues by about $48,000. The general fund contribution to the public authority is $65,000, and they were not requesting any mid-year budget adjustments. The governor proposes in his budget to limit services to IHSS recipients. He tried this for budget year 09-10, and it's currently being litigated with an injunction preventing implementation. He also sought legislative approval to reduce states' participation in IHSS provider wages, and as Jean mentioned earlier, his initial ruling in court has not allowed that, and he plans to appeal, and he's included it in the current budget proposal. Public health cash carry at June 30th was $1.6 million. Mid-year revenues received has been about 47.8% of what was budgeted. Expenditures equal about 43% of what was budgeted, with mid-year expenditures exceeding revenues by $301,000. Again, has to do with the claiming and reimbursement by the state. But there is no general fund contribution to public health. They noted in their report that they do expect a decrease in revenues of about $110,996, and this is due to decline in revenue and realignment revenue, interest earned, and transfer from designated fund. However, they will be reducing, or they'll have savings in their expenditures to offset that revenue decrease from vacant positions and reduction in services and supplies. Mental health, excuse me, their cash carry at 6/30/09 was $1.2 million. Mid-year revenues are 42% of what was budgeted. Expenditures are at 46% of what was budgeted, with mid-year expenditures exceeding revenues by almost $600,000. The general fund contribution to the mental health budget is $7,189. That's the maintenance of effort required to draw down the realignment revenues. They also are expecting a decrease in revenues of about $176,000. And again, this is interest earned due to decreases in interest earned, realignment sales tax, and transfer from designated funds, which will be offset with salary savings and reductions in services and supplies. The governor is proposing another budget ballot measure in June of 2010 to redirect Mental Health Services Act funds. Similar budget ballot failed in May of 2009. Should it pass, its significant impact to county mental health programs, and the loss of those funds would also that support the Medi-Cal services would result in the loss of federal funds as well. Substance abuse programs, excuse me, I'm fighting the problem as well. Cash carry at June 2009 was nearly $547,000. At mid-year, 30% of those revenues had been, budgeted revenues had been realized, while expenditures are at 37% of budgeted. Mid-year expenditures exceeded revenues by about $223,000. And like public health, there's their general fund contribution to the substance abuse programs. They also expect a revenue decrease of about $87,000 due to interest earned and a reduction in federal justice assistance grant funds, and this will be offset with reductions in services and supplies. Again, as part of the governor's proposal, he wants to eliminate the substance abuse offender treatment program. And we're just going to touch a little bit on the state budget simply because it's such a constantly moving target. And we really don't have a good feel for what will be happening for 10-11 until May revise comes out. But at the moment, the state is looking at a $9.9 billion deficit across the remainder of this year and into next year. They're requesting $6.9 billion in additional federal funds. And if those aren't received, then the governor has proposed numerous trigger cuts that will severely impact health and human services programs. Some of the solutions that are in this budget have been previously defeated in the May 2009 special elections. The solutions are litigated in court, and we still don't know the outcome of all of those. So it's really difficult to project what the state budget will look like and what those impacts ultimately will mean for the counties. Two of the things that we're watching closely in the special legislative session, as Jean mentioned earlier, was the transportation funding swap. The governor initially proposed a funding swap that then the Senate Democrats put forth their own plan. The plans that were finally sent to the governor eliminate sales tax on gasoline only, not on diesel. It institutes an excise tax, but it includes language that holds harmless local streets and roads funding secured under Prop 42. Additionally, the cash management component with payment deferrals to counties. Fortunately for our county, AB X85 was signed by the governor exempting small counties with populations under 50,000 from the deferrals.
So what do we need to do? Well, we need to take some actions now. I mean, you don't really have a whole lot of choices other than to reduce expenditures or find new revenues. And so what we've put together for you is a list of all the things that we think we ought to pursue. The first is we need to aggressively pursue the monies owed the county. And my experience has been the squeaky wheel gets the grease. I know that the behavioral health services staff, fiscal staff is relentless upon the Department of Mental Health to get reimbursement for invoices sent. And oftentimes, if you nag them enough, you are more successful in receiving those funds a bit earlier than you might expect. Because of the way the reimbursement occurs for a number of departments, particularly those that rely on grants where they actually invoice the state after a quarter ends, we're in this situation where the quarter ends the end of March. You have to wait till the auditor's reports come out in April, and then we submit those invoices. But we need to submit those invoices to the state as soon as we possibly can to get our cash flow flowing and get reimbursements to the county as soon as possible. And I think departments have certainly indicated to me that they're doing that and are looking at all their reimbursements carefully. We need to curtail spending, eliminate non-essential expenditures. A department head meeting yesterday, we had a lengthy discussion, and all departments, I think, are taking a look at this and seeing where they can eliminate spending that they might otherwise have expected to spend, but because of the deficit will not. The board could consider additional mid-year budget reductions. We can encourage the use of voluntary time off. There's a number of departments and staff. This is a discretionary approval item by department heads that if I wanted to volunteer, for example, 2 days a month, I take 2 days where I voluntarily take time off and don't get paid. Some of us actually work on those days, others actually get the time. But it has to be done department by department because different departments have different projects that require staff to be present, but there might be some downtimes where some people could be encouraged to take some time off, and if people are able to do that, it can save some money. We could relook at the retirement incentive package. There were a number of conditions on that retirement incentive package last year that frankly, the non-general fund departments took more advantage of it than the general funds because of the requirement that you had to hold the position open for 3 years. Certainly in behavioral health, we knew we were not going to see additional funding probably for 3 years, so it made sense to allow people to take that. But for some general fund departments, it did not. So I think we could look at that, and I don't have any actual answers for you right now, but perhaps there's a way in working with our workforce and get some ideas from our employees how that might work to incentivize some folks who might be close to retirement who may consider it if there was some type of incentive. I think the board should consider transferring public health realignment funds to CalWorks and Human Services and back out some of the general fund money that's dedicated to social services. That's a way to save some general fund money. Colleen and I have been very prudent about the public health realignment funds. We have held positions vacant, anticipating the general funds need. The board is allowed to transfer 10% of the realignment among accounts for the amount of money that you receive in a given year. It requires a public hearing to be held, but it is one way to provide some additional funds to CalWorks. In terms of revenue, you can, I think we ought to revisit the fee schedules. The board could consider a ballot measure to increase the transit occupancy tax, otherwise known as the motel hotel tax. Visitors that come to our county do use our roads, they use our law enforcement services. So some people could argue that they should help share in the cost of those providing those services. I note that recently Tuolumne County just voted to approve an increase from 8% to 10%. The board could reconsider your prior direction when you adopted the final budget in the fall that directed funds to the general fund reserve. As Shirley indicated, that transfer is not generally done until the end of the year, so that has not been done. Those funds are in the budget currently. You could use those funds to bridge the gap right now. Again, you could utilize the general fund contingencies also. So between the general fund reserve and the general fund contingencies, you could fund the budget gap, but you wouldn't have a whole lot left. Now, the economy could get better. We certainly hope it does. We want everyone to please spend locally. When you spend money in the county, if those sales taxes come to our county and help provide the services that you all provide on behalf of the public. We've estimated at this point a cash carry of about $240,000. Depending on the expenditure declines, it could be more. It could be more if there's a little bit more revenue. We don't know if there will be additional state cuts between March and July 1. We just, I don't see that happening based on the discussions at the legislative level at this point, but one never knows. So at this point, that's where we are for the current year. So we've got the current year where we anticipate if we continue on the trend we are, we need to make some plans so that we don't end up with a deficit as of July 1. For next year, 10-11, first we always take a look at the revenue. We always hope that the revenue is going to be a little bit higher than it was in the current year. And unfortunately, the worst news I think I heard was when the acting assessor said, I hate to tell you this, I hate to estimate, but we believe that based on what we're seeing, it's anywhere from a 7 to a 10% devaluation of properties, which is going to result in a loss of anywhere between $700,000 to $1 million. So we took the 10% figure, since it could be 10%, it could be higher, we don't know. And the assessor assures me she'll let us know as soon as she knows anything more to kind of get closer to what actually might be. The VLF revenue that's tied to the property tax, because the property tax is devalued, then you have a loss in VLF revenue as well for an additional hit. Because the non-general fund departments have decreased, eliminated positions, reduced, there will be a reduction in the A87 revenue that comes back in to support the general fund departments, because there's overall less expenditures on the non-general fund side of the house. We've included that there's a revenue loss due to the lapse of the public safety concessions. The side letter agreements end June 30th, 2009. And so we've assumed that those concessions are off the table, and so the additional cost that we must anticipate is another $455,000 approximately for next fiscal year. We know that there will be increased expenditures related to salaries and benefits. You've got the expiration of the negotiated concessions. You've got basically some people still getting merit and longevity and step increases, just as normal, in agreement with our current MOU. Francine has let us know that the rising unemployment, the COBRA, and the insurance premium costs are going to hit us with a big wallop, anticipating an increase of $625,000 next fiscal year. And risk management is really taking a close look at that, and we'll be analyzing that in the next quarter as well to look at the claims. So I'm hoping there'll be a little bit more there, but don't count on it. I think in terms of actions that we need to do more research on some of the cost reduction strategies that have been used by other counties. And we're a county no different than any other that has been experiencing tremendous pain and gut-wrenching decisions. Some of these items, there's only so many items, although I'm really encouraging employees to come up with new items and ideas for discussion. Certainly, employee pays part of their PERS or all of their PERS, employee contributions. We can look at furloughs. We can look at a reduced work week, which is what Amador County has done with the 36-hour work week, and they're closed on Fridays. They've got some special circumstances that they work around. We understand that many of these items require further discussion with our labor organizations and workforce. And again, these require more really analytical work to figure out what exactly the savings would be. We need to look at consolidating, sharing functions and resources. I think we need to look at what is going to fall off the table in terms of services, non-mandated services. How we provide services to the public and the manner in which it looks may be very different next year. And I think it's going to take a concerted effort with all the departments. Particularly, we've grouped departments in functional groups to be able to talk about how services can be shared or delivered differently given the need for reductions, whether it's workforce, services, supplies, what have you. We can look at a 17.5% reduction to general fund contributions to departments. I don't really like across-the-board cuts, but as a starting point, it's a way for us to get on the table what the magnitude of the cuts would be for each department and be able to address that, what we anticipate is a $3.1 million deficit. I'm suggesting that we do not entertain new positions or reclassification requests, at this juncture. I think it would require a lot of work that could be better spent on looking at how we might organize ourselves differently, which will require a multidisciplinary approach to looking at structures and across disciplines. The anticipated revenue losses and expenditure increases are about $3.1 million. Again, we do not have control over the state budget, and certainly ask all our citizenry to lobby our state legislators to please address the state budget deficit now, not later. The longer it goes on, the harsher the hits are locally. So please help us out and take action now so that we can plan ahead. We hope the revenue increases, that economic conditions, that the writing on the wall, I've read, Shirley's read, the recession's ended, we're heading toward recovery, but we just haven't seen it here locally yet. But certainly, we hope our sales tax will increase, and some of our businesses will be able to do a little bit better this next coming year. And certainly, we have an escalation in the cost of doing business. So those are some of the things that are impacting the 2010-11 budget. It's grim. It requires, I think, due diligence by all of us to work on analyzing every aspect of our revenues and expenditures to see what we might change or do differently next year to continue to serve the citizens of the county, and also look at what services we should be providing, and then what also perhaps the private sector should provide and the county should no longer provide. Those are always things that I think you have to put in the mix. So with that, I'd like some board direction. And Shirley and I are here to answer any questions you might have.
What I'm going to do is ask the board if they have any questions or comments. I will open it up for any public or staff comments. Then I will bring it back to the board to hopefully give some direction to staff on the 9-10 budget. Are there any board questions or comments at this point? Yes.
Admittedly, this is kind of like a very small finger in a fairly large hole in the dike, but when I was on the Calaveras Leadership Group, we took a hard look at TOT, at the possibility of raising that, and I think that it certainly is very apparent to most people that it would produce some benefits to raise the tax from the current fairly low rate at 6 to 8 or 10 or whatever. But when you look the raw, the amount of taxes currently being collected at $1.2 million for the entire county, 800,000 of that comes from the city of Angels, and it struck me that there's bound to be a significant amount of spillage, or the taxes that are perhaps being collected by cabin owners or private citizens that rent out their homes or cabins for the weekends that aren't either they may be collecting it but they aren't paying it. And when I talked to Lynn Norfolk about this, about how we could go about tracking that a little bit more closely, she said it became an issue of how much money do you want to spend to get this additional potential revenue expansion. We just approved a couple of positions for the administration. Is there any possibility that one of these positions or both of them could be dedicated to try to formulate a plan that we could identify, first of all, if there is spillage? Here's an article that I saw about the Colorado ski towns are beginning to enforce their rental lodging taxes. They've recognized that there's a significant revenue opportunity that they're missing back in Colorado. And my question to you is, are we missing that here? Should we look at that first before taking off and going on the expansion of the TOT?
Well, we can certainly put it on our list for things to look at, and I can talk to the treasurer tax collector to see, how audits are currently performed to see when, how that works, and we can report back to you. I don't know when the last audit was done of the TOT.
But again, it's, as Russ said, it's just a small hole, but that's what we're looking at these days. Is there anything else, Russ?
Not
Gary?
right now.
Steve? Tom?
Well, Jeannie asked sort of what the board's thought on what to do next. I guess what I'd like to do next is schedule a closed session as soon as possible, I guess, and And if you look at under her actions needed, under the first request, and then there's 3 sub-requests, all require some degree of consultation with the unions. And I think we should have a discussion amongst the board as to just, how we wish to divide this up, how we wish to go about it. I think that is an entirely an appropriate closed session item. And I think that's probably where the discussion basically should go, since that's going to be, I suspect, a very significant component of any solution.
Okay.
So those are my comments.
I have some questions, Shirley. Just Russ's on the TOT. If we're pretty much on course, why do you anticipate it being less? I thought we were pretty much 52%, I thought I read in the staff report.
I believe we were down about, the way we were looking at it, it will come in based on what was received. And when I was actually looking at the projections, for mid-year, I stated this is where we are, but I also pulled in January and February. So when looking at it, if I extrapolated that out, it looked like we might be short about 24,000, I believe, is the number.
Okay, all right, thank you. If I understand the state revenue subventions on the rural and small county law enforcement, AB 443, so we anticipate receiving pretty much under 400,000 versus the 500,000 that we have been receiving. You said 106, we will be getting second quarter, we received 90, and if we
get the third quarter, when we get the third quarter, which we fully expect to do in April, it will be probably somewhere in that neighborhood, 90 to 106,000. And then the fourth quarter, we will receive it. It's just more likely that it will be received in the next fiscal year.
Okay, so we're still getting the 500. It's just coming in a lot differently, and some will be in the next fiscal year. Okay, thank you. On the general fund expenditures, public safety, when you mentioned freezing major OES grant expenditures, was this the state OES? I thought, I wasn't clear.
Actually, when the mid-year report came in from the Sheriff's Department under OES, they spoke of temporarily freezing major expenditures so that the reimbursements could catch up, because the reimbursements are behind. And if you go and you spend $500,000 in grant expenditures in May, you're definitely not going to get $500,000 before that reimbursed before the end of the fiscal year. And since the state has been taking longer to reimburse those, it was my understanding from the report that they were going to slow those expenses down until the reimbursements caught up.
Okay.
They're trying to help cash flow.
Yeah. That's why the 50,000 populations.
Oh, it's big.
But that doesn't apply to everything.
No,
And so-
that's just an additional amount of money that they would have withheld, that we would not have anticipated them withholding.
The deferrals more or less were health and human services and roads
transportation,
and transportation. These are grant reimbursements. These are the grants that have went out and applied for specific purposes.
On the May 09 special election, have we received that?
That is included in the 10-11 budget.
When you developed the budget, you thought you would get that money this year. That's one of those that, it's in the governor's budget for next year, so we're hopeful we'll get that. But it won't be this year.
Pursuing monies owed the county, I understood there was a partnership being developed or is developed between the counties and the courts for
MOU.
pursuing revenue collections, like fees, so forth. That was the Administration of Justice Committee yesterday.
There's an
we
MOU that the court has been working on with the county that has been in process for months, even before my arrival, that will be coming to the board, and that will allow us to recoup some costs for buildings and grounds and some other costs. I think that's what you're talking about.
Okay. All right. Those are just the questions I had now. Thank you. I'd like to open it up to any public or staff members who would like to make a comment. The objective for today would be having staff get some direction on what we would like the administrative office to do on the 2009-10 budget.
Marina, may I interrupt too? Also,
Sure.
we also need direction on the 09-10, whether you want to use the general fund reserves and contingencies as
What
to
did I
bridge the
say?
gap.
You said
10-11.
I said 10.
10, yeah. I mean, there's two prongs.
Right. What we
One
want
is-
is 9-10 to give some direction.
Yeah. Because if you don't want to use the reserves and you don't want to use the contingencies, then we're going to have to look at some additional cuts.
Well, Lynn doesn't want us using the reserves.
No, she wouldn't.
On the question of the reserves, since you just brought that up, if we do that, then are we going to have to go out for short gap through trans and do that? Because that's what we've done before.
I don't think we know the answer to that, but this is the money we're going to transfer into reserves that has not been transferred yet.
The reserves
okay.
stand a little over $2 million, and what it was, the board's direction was to, instead of putting $950,000 into contingencies, put $450,000 in contingencies and transfer $507,000 into the reserves. That transfer has not occurred.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Without that transfer, what is the amount of the reserve currently?
A little over $2 million.
Okay. Well, I'll go back to where I was initially, and that is, I think we should, on both these, the 09-10 and the 10-11, I think we should have a closed session and discuss that, because if we are going to take some particular action to, as a board, to address the 2010-2011 budget reduction, perhaps the board might decide to implement that action prior to the end of the fiscal year. And if so, then that would also be addressing the 09-10 budget. So I guess I'm not willing to commit to much of anything until we actually have a discussion with the board and staff present as to, because I think part of it is just when you implement whatever the actions that are going to be required for 2010 and 2011. And I think all of that is going to, I suspect some component of all of that is going to revolve around some meet and confer issues. And I think if that's the case, then we probably should have a closed session item on that.
Thank you.
That's my
Mr.
2 cents
Segal.
worth.
Thank you. Mr. Segale.
Thank you, Al Segala, Taxpayer Association. Well, several things. One, it seems as though we're not at the bottom. We may be going lower. And also, we can't really trust information coming from the federal government, like the recession's over. I think we can trust the assessor's projections of perhaps a 10% reduction in income. In my real estate business, I see that, and I see that happening. Property values are continuing to go down. It seemed, for one thing, you're doing a good job. You have a mid-year, you're so close to where you anticipated before, which shows there was good thinking starting out. But looking ahead, it looks like it'd be wise to plan at least a contingency budget to anticipate some significant losses in the coming 6 months, so that there won't be any sort of surprise. And the second thing is, don't know if you know Greg Petro. He's the CAO of Tuolumne County. He had a luncheon talk to the Chamber of Commerce over there, which I listened to. I was very impressed with that man. I asked him to give me a summary of what his remarks, but he didn't do it. But in those remarks, he ticked off a number of things that county did in the way of privatization, and also some other cost-saving things that it did. And I want to get this information to you. I wasn't able to do it, and I apologize. But what could be done is use some of the CAO's money to hire a consultant. And I'm not talking about somebody on staff or anything like Mittner. I'm talking about maybe a few hours of an expert in privatization. Contact the Reason Foundation. They used to have an organization called the Local Government something or other. But what they did is they kept track of all the communities, not just in California but nationwide, of ways they found to save money through the process of privatization. And sometimes some of these don't work. Other ones are just not feasible. And of course, sometimes there's resistance from organized labor. But having an expert, and it's not me, having an expert look at your whole budget from the standpoint of privatization, what could really be done from the private sector? At least then you'll have an array of possibilities that you can discuss further. We don't have anybody right now that's an expert at that with us. So, and the cost of doing that, I'm sure, is going to be far less than the amount of money that you would be able to save. And once again, good job and an excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Tuttle, please.
I noticed the report on the last page. The CAO is asking for actions needed, and I know that we're going to be preparing our preliminary budgets. So I don't know if she wanted that today, but I think what's important to me and a lot of the department heads is to know as soon as possible if we're going to be preparing our proposed budgets showing 17.5% reduction in general fund contributions, so we can go back and start figuring out what we're going to do.
That's up to the board. That's on the list.
Thanks.
On Mr. Segala's suggestion about privatization, I'm not aware that Tuolumne County has privatized anything except their hospital. Can you shed a light on anything else?
If I wasn't so old, I remember things better. On the items that Greg Pedro ticked off, they had a tremendous saving by privatizing their hospital. That was bleeding that county like $5 million a year. It was really serious. You don't have that problem here because you already have a private hospital. Taxpayers don't pay for your hospital. Another one they found was privatizing food in the jail. Do you have a contractor doing that now?
No.
Okay, there's one item. Now, if you get an expert to look at this thing, they'll probably find a whole lot more items. And these are items that other jurisdictions or other cities and counties have found to be successful. We're not talking about something out of, off the deep end. We're talking about things that could work and could allow you to provide a better service at less cost.
Hi, Carl Stoughton. First off, John Hamilton, your wife called. She's looking for you. I'm sorry, folks, but it's true. I wanted to address Thomas's question about the TOT tax. Most municipalities have a surcharge of about 3% that's on top of the TOT tax. They use the TOT tax for road maintenance and other fixed county uses, and that surcharge goes to the Visitors Bureau and museums and other facilities that aren't really part of the county. So there you go.
The surcharge in Mariposa was done by the private businesses themselves. It was not done by the county.
In Oakland, it was done by the city, and it was voted as Major C.
So it was a vote.
Different places, but
So it has to be voted on
It has to be voted on.
at
Yes.
2/3 vote.
Yes, and I'm sure Tom will want to write the opposition if they do put up a surcharge ballot. So, and Russ can write the pro. So we
thank
have
you.
two sides here.
Colleen Tracy, Health Services Agency Director. And as Jeannie pointed out, both of us had, since 2007, certainly recognized the worsening situation for the county overall, have been very conscious and aware of the provision that exists in statute to transfer health and also mental health realignment and also social services realignment, but recognize the worsening situation. In addition to recognizing that, I do want to point out, and if the board decides, of course, that they would like to conduct a public hearing attendant to the transfer of 10% of the health realignment to conserve county general fund and make that available for other county needs, which I think is what Jeannie's and our shared intent has been on this. One of the things that I will bring up is that the realignment represents 57% of the total budgeted revenue for this department for public health. But there's an important demand, and that's the other thing that Jeannie and I have always been very prudent and will need to continue to be so, and that is that this is the budget unit that carries the expenditure associated with the Section 17,000 Welfare and Institutions Code for the provision of medically indigent health care. And that expenditure represents over $900,000 and is paid from our realignment. So over half of the realignment revenue in public health is basically committed to that CMSP contribution, which continues to be a very good investment for Calaveras County. Our claims are between $2 and $3 million for approximately $1 million investment, and so that continues to be prudent. We do recognize that they're in this type of economic situation that people need to be kept whole, and we recognize that just basically from a Maslow's hierarchy of actualization, you need to be able to have shelter, you need to be able to have food. Hopefully you don't become sick, okay? I think it's also important that unemployment data in the United States, our preferred method of financing health care is through employer-supported health insurance. And as that unemployment rate increases, we see increased demand in CMSP. And the caseload for Calaveras County has increased about 70% over the last 2 years. And CMSP is, as other publicly funded organizations are, rapidly depleting the reserve and are anticipating changes not until 12/13. Now, it's a very well-managed program, I find, and so I believe that they're doing prudent actions to prevent themselves falling off a cliff. But should that happen, that demand would come back on the county. However, by that time, maybe we will start to be seeing the effects of some type of an economic recovery. So I wanted to speak to this item.
Thank you.
Jim Turley with SEIU, and I appreciate the position that you are all in, but we have to go back a couple of steps. We gave last year in excess of $1.6 million in savings to the county. The Sheriff's Department took a different step, and they're going to get their $455,000 back.
Could you speak up, please, Mr. Turley? Thank you.
Okay. In any case, and I have no problem with them getting the money back. I would like our positions back as well. I don't think we can give one without giving the other, if indeed we do. If we're going to request additional cuts, then I would think that if the Sheriff's Department gets the $455,000 back, that their cut this year would double, $900,000, which I don't think would be acceptable to them and wouldn't be acceptable to anybody. but math, and let's face it, that's what we're doing is math, moving numbers around. That would be the fair math way of doing it. Now, in looking forward, this year with the cuts that we took, we have managed to service the public with minimal impact. If you continue to cut staff or cut salaries or cut people or limit what you want, then your dreams of progressing in this county have to change to the point that it's a stalemate. You're not going to grow. You're not going to go anywhere as far as progress until you turn this around. Our contract ends June 30th of this year. We're going to start negotiations in April. I will not, as president of the union, present a 10% cut or a 7% PERS payment or furlough times to my membership. I will not go into negotiations with that as being part of the package. We have gone 30 months knowing that the economic situation is what it is. We have gone 30 months without asking or receiving any kind of pay increase. The majority of the county employees, your constituents, have gone 30 months. We won't ask for a lot, but we need some help. And if you continue the cuts and continue down the road that you continue down with the passing of your resolution today, you show absolutely no regard to the employees of the county, and that's hurtful. And I sincerely hope that the incumbents and the people that are going to run after you keep that in mind. We have a force of 250 plus people that will be watching your next step. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any comments they'd like to make? I'd like to then bring it back to the board if there's no other comments. Mr. Thomas?
Well, prior to Mr. Turley's last comment, I wasn't necessarily in favor of taking this into a closed session, but from the experience that I've had in labor negotiations, it just seems like that was kind of a statement in advance that the union does not consider itself to be in a position to negotiate. Don't come to us with any proposal to negotiate. And I think that pretty much compels me to agree with Supervisor Tryon's suggestion that we take this immediately into a closed session. I very much regret having to say that, but that's the way I'm looking at this.
That is one of the options. There's also other options out there that we're being asked to consider. So do any of the board members want to voice their opinions? And so staff will know. Mr. Walensky.
Reading through this, nobody can take great joy in the moment. I don't see a lot of smiling faces out there, and there's certainly none up here. As I said in the earlier discussion, I don't think our generation has had a whole lot of experience with this level of economic dislocation and disruption. Things that we assumed were sort of the standard in public service are now completely up for challenge, and the underpinnings of civil service and good governance are certainly up for review. I want to express my support for some of these things and highlight the things that I think are most important in this. On page 21 of our document that we were given, and I really hope that everybody here had a chance to read it, because it's more thorough than what you saw in the PowerPoint, although those points are made. The thing that I hold dear, and part of my history, former life, is expressed in the following sentence at the top of the page. The county encourages the entire workforce to engage in identifying possible budget reduction strategies that will help reduce budget deficit. I would add to that I think it's important that we have strategies to preserve services to the public. That's the whole purpose of government. And somehow we must find a higher level of engagement. There's a very cynical mood, and I think that mood is well earned. I think that we've had a sense of betrayal, inequity, the relationships that have transpired between labor and management in this county have not always been well conducted or well appreciated, and my sense is that this moment will test our ability to conduct good faith negotiations as part of the process. It requires engagement. It requires people who know about the nature of work to be ready to help shape it in a way that is efficient, that benefits the public, that reiterates our mission. Without you, we're left, without that input, we're left with a more abstract and far away perspective, which will often find poor results for all. When we talk about setting the table for the kind of discussions that we're going to have, at least part of this has to do with what kinds of other initiatives we're actually practicing. And I'd like to outline a few that I think are not in here that I would hope we would find. We talk about the idea of internal efficiencies, and right now the department heads, and I presume the departments, are engaged in talking about how each department might operate in a more efficient way. And I also believe that the department head meetings are beginning to address ways, and the working groups in particular, are ways that people can begin to address internal efficiencies that move various departments working together to find solutions. Sometimes it's in training and cross-training. I was a little alarmed that we were talking about cutting the training budget, because there are moments where if you train and cross-train a workforce, people can move with the flow of work and help one another out when we're short-staffed, which we're going to be. And so some level of investing in this workforce is going to be important in seeing this through. And training and cross-training is one example of that. However, something that's missing entirely, and this is endemic in rural county organization, but something that's missing is how do we, once we get our own world together within departments and between departments, how do we relate to the rest of the world? I've noted that Supervisor Tryon has often said that volunteers doing partnerships with the county have done great service. And I think we're going to have to rely on our communities standing up and helping out in a wide range of, in a wide area of effort. Parks and Rec has been a good example of that, but we have, and the food banks and other things have been part of that. We can rely on those partnerships if we develop them and formalize them. Another aspect of this is what do we do between agencies? I have 4 areas that I think are critical that we start looking at with our school districts, with the water districts, with the multiple agencies doing public service. We don't have joint purchasing agreements. We're all buying the same stuff, but in small quantities. Having some kind of consolidation of just that effort could save money. A second area that seems to make sense is the idea of fleet management, not just within the county. We seem to have several different versions of that going on, not all of them very efficient. But we also have entire fleets with several school districts, again, water agencies. Why not find common management of this? Why not find common economies of scale just in purchasing fleets. When you're larger, you have an opportunity to save money, let alone the maintenance of them. When we're not doing preventive maintenance on a common scale across the board, we wind up having our vehicles last fewer years and wind up having heroic efforts keeping them going with higher maintenance. It's kind of like the transmission ad, you can pay me now or pay me later, but if we don't manage that in a common and thorough way, it won't work. I'd say the same thing for information technology. If you take a look at the school districts and take a look at some of our previous investments, you can see that different agencies that often have a need for communications have completely different systems, and that sometimes we don't even master the ones we have before they're obsolete. I believe that a common effort between public agencies in a small county would go a long way to saving money there, certainly on the purchase in the first place. Again, large scale matters, and we're a small scale county that can't afford to divide ourselves in the many pieces that we have. I also believe that we have issues with our health benefits. We're having a national debate about this, but prevention matters. And having a local health product that it has agreements with local hospitals and local providers, but connected to larger networks such as the CHW and Sutter ones that are available in this area, we might be able to negotiate over time with good hard effort, and it takes more than a year even to develop such a thing, but there could be a local plan that emphasizes prevention, emphasizes use of local facilities, cuts the middleman out of the arrangement, and could save money. These are big expenditures that we're doing, but we're not thinking enough outside of our own structural entities to be able to even get to these solutions. We've got to start talking beyond our borders. And I don't see any way out of this. You know, we can tinker with the deck chairs here, but the people talking about it was painful last year at 17.5%, and are looking forward to this year at roughly the same level of disaster. It's just not within our capacity to both fulfill our mission and stay within this structure. It does not house solutions. And the way we are isolating the discussion is a sure recipe for failure. But the second part of that is that without doing these efficiencies and without showing good faith in that, it's going to be very hard to pin this whole thing on the backs of the workforce. And setting the table in that way without their initiatives on a broader and more long-term structural basis only condemns us to repeat experiences like last year, which I found to be awkward at best and, I don't know, cruel and capricious at worst. Let me add one other thing. I don't think that when we look at the entire workforce, that a one-size-fits-all approach, if we're all in it together, all the way from the board, all the way through every line worker, then we've got to find ways of including service considerations and the different funding sources to be able to come up with an equitable solution for whatever kinds of agreements we reach. And let me add a couple of these that are on my mind. We have people working with federal dollars that if you reduce hours, you wind up actually reducing federal dollars. So clearly, if that crowd has to do, and much of this is outside the general fund consideration, but it's an important group, it's a numerically high group, and the services they provide are critical. So how do you deal with that? And what is a way that groups like that can make contributions without destroying the program? Secondly, you have public safety, which is every time you reduce an hour or a job there, what you do is you trigger overtime expenses. So what is the form of contribution that makes sense there? We have yet other folks who are fee-based. And when their fees are down, like the building department, layoffs, huge layoffs at high percentage of the workforce have already occurred. So what is fair and equitable in relation to that? Unless we're thinking in a complex way and have more than one size fitting all, we're never going to get to agreements that are truly fair and equitable, but also mindful of the service requirements that we face. I believe that unless we can all come together at least equitably, if not all in the same way, that there's no hope for moving anything beyond wholesale slashes in personnel and services, and that is something I oppose.
Mr. Tuffanelli?
I'm in favor of what Supervisor Thomas and Tryon advocate for as closed session. Discuss this.
I support a closed session, but that is only one component of what it is that is before us. There are a list of suggestions that the staff has on page 20 for the 9-10 budget year. I think we should consider these. These are things that need to be done in the public arena to get started. They're not things that would be said in a closed session in terms of where we might want to go in negotiating with our unions, which I think we should be doing that anyway, because as Steve said, we're all of us are in this. I agree with Stephen that we need to redefine how we do services, and as he stated, looking to the other agencies to partner on purchasing and so forth. I think that's a challenge for our administrative office to do in working with the other agencies. That's not something that is going to help us through the 9-10 budget year. What is it that we are going to be giving staff to get us through the 9-10 budget year? And as the district attorney asked, if what you're saying is giving us a 17.5% that we need to deal with as a cut, just tell us, and that's how we'll start working. I know last year the departments all wanted, just give us a number and we'll do it. Well, with how the state changes on a daily basis, I don't think that we can easily do that, but I think it's a starting place. And I think I would be very comfortable in saying, yes, I think staff in going into the future, into the 10-11 budget year, taking a 17.5% budget cut is probably appropriate. I mean, I don't think the federal government is going to rescue us for $7 billion, which is what's being asked. And if they do, maybe some of that will trickle down to us, but I think we need to go to the worst case scenario. I think the CAO saying we're going to do 10% reduction in assessed value is the appropriate way to budget. And anything less than that, I think, is foolish on our part. And going back to page 20, separate from going into a closed session and giving direction to staff on where we think we would like negotiations to go. We heard what Mr. Turley said. That's their position. They can bring that to the table, but we need to start talking now. We need to start working together now. Okay. That aside, I continue to support the voluntary time off. I'd like to, and we've done this before, keep vacant positions open on a 2 to 3 month period for salary savings. Eliminating all non-essential expenditures such as travel and training. That's what we need to do to, as Steve referred to try and save jobs. Then that's what we need to do. Pursuing monies and however format that's done in individual departments and the county as a whole. We should all, I'm assuming most of the departments are doing that. Revisiting the retirement incentive package, I'm not sure what that looks like. If it's what we did last year and you're asking to do that or go there, again, we need to look at how many people would be eligible and what would be the cost, and then what would be the savings. So I'm not clear on that
We need to
one.
relook at that. I mean, I'd like to get some more input on that as to
Okay,
if
'cause
we
that-
changed it, what would it look like?
Okay, so I can't address that at this time. I do support transferring 10% of the realignment revenues. This is the time for us to utilize reserves, and I know every department in here has their hidden stash. And I'm saying now is the time to spend that stash.
That was last year's year.
Oh, well, I'd tell you what we call it, but that'd be giving away a secret. But I would be looking to the administrative office, I'd be looking to Karen Varney, who does the board's budget, to be looking at those same things. Now is the time to do it. Fee schedules, I'm not supportive of looking at fee schedules now. I don't think we're there. The only exception is that we're hoping, and it's really sort of not a fee, is the integrated waste management. Mr. Garcia is coming back to us on the solid waste trust fund, or solid waste fund. And that's a parcel tax, but I would still like that program to come forward. It has a big impact to all residents in Calaveras County. The ballot measure to increase TOT, I think there needs to be more discussion. Ms. Boyce and I met with the chamber last week. We discussed that. I understand the Visitors Bureau has a different take on it. If it's not something that has a strategy for it among those people who are really involved, I'm somewhat reluctant for the board to just put that on the ballot. So I'm not clear on wanting to support the TOT. So that's kind of where I am on the 910, to give staff somewhere to start moving. If the board has any different thoughts on the recommendations.
Do you wish to poll us on these recommendations? Is it, Jeannie, do you need
That would be helpful. I mean,
clarity on this? Yeah.
Okay, Mr. Thomas? I mean, given that we will be asking staff to go into a closed session, not today, to discuss how we want to frame our discussions with our bargaining units.
Okay, I'm in support of these bullet point items, but I'd like a little bit more clarification about this as the one-time measure about the 700 to deal with the anticipated $717,000 shortfall. Can you explain more about this the budget transfer of the $507,000?
I forgot that. Thank you. Yeah.
that was prior board direction in the fall that you were going to move money to the general reserve. It has not been moved. Shirley has indicated that it's usually moved at the end. So if you'd like, we can leave it. I don't know if we have to actually move it to contingencies, but leave it so that you can use it to backfill your revenue loss that's anticipated if, in fact, revenues continue as they happen for the first 6 months and expenditures aren't likely reduced between now and June 30th.
Okay, so
it's essentially, it bridges the gap.
And we've received those monies? This was the Prop 1A money?
Yes.
We have received them?
Yes, we received the first payment of Prop 1A money. What it is, when we did proposed budget last year, at preliminary budget, we had $1.5 million in contingencies, and we said we wanted to leave that there in case the state suspended Prop 1A. The board then went and allocated a certain amount of that. When we came back to final budget and we had about 900,000, we said the board directed 450,000 to remaining contingencies, 507 for a transfer into reserves.
Okay,
That
and
has not yet been done.
Because we haven't received all of it yet.
We usually do it at the end of the year.
And you're asking that we do it earlier than that?
No, we're asking you not to do it. We're asking you to, essentially as contingency to make up for the revenue shortfall.
We're basically asking the board to decide that only do that transfer if the shortfall does not occur.
Got it. Okay, thank you. Just a second. Mr. Garcia, you're biting at the bit. God.
Do you have good news?
Heavens no.
Oh. Well, that's not good.
I do have a question, though. The holding open vacant positions, does that apply to general fund or non-general fund or both departments? We have vacant, actually a position we're interviewing for tomorrow on the fleet manager that we hope to fill. And it would be a shame to leave that vacant for 2 to 3 months as we desperately need it.
I think
there's irony in that, isn't there?
Yes, there is.
I think you can go ahead and proceed with that. It's usually, there's always that transition period where we've been interviewing, and we would leave that to the discretion of the CAO. I think in concept, what we're saying is if you get an opening, we would like it to be a 2 to 3 month period.
And we have, along with all the other departments, have left our vacant positions open in anticipation of something like this.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Garcia. Mr. Thomas, did you have anything?
I'm sure that what occurred, that this says emphatically that this was just a board direction. We did not specifically say get this done, so doing nothing will essentially accomplish what you're asking for.
That's my understanding. Do we need to make a specific budget adjustment, Shirley, when we bring it back? We may have to come.
It just shows as a transfer into reserves. I'll double check with the auditor's office, and if so, I can include that in the mid-year adjustments when I bring it back to the board.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Tuffanelli?
Done? Yeah, I just wanted to emphasize that I would be in favor of doing what is recommended here.
Well, I'm in favor of what the bullet points have to say, but pursuing state subvention funds, I'm not so sure we're going to get very far on that.
All we can do is bang.
And I understand the $507,953, trying to close our gap here at the end of the year, not putting that into reserves. That will allow for us, though, if we do that, some cash carry at the rate we're going. Is that correct? Because we have 400 and something in contingencies that hasn't been touched so far.
If our projections hold, it will give us a $240,000 cash carry if we do not make the general fund, the transfer to general fund reserves. And we use that to bridge the gap as well as a portion of contingencies. It should give us a $240,000 cash carry. That was what
Which is like saying 0.
It'll be a little more than last year, 183.
A little bit more than last year, not much. So I'm in favor of what's the bullet points you have here.
What about the review of fee schedules?
How do I stand on that? Well, I think we can certainly review them.
Usually we do a review of fees once a year prior to the budget,
But this is
separate
not
from
as
the
usual.
budget process.
Right.
You're asking that we do it even sooner.
I think
Well, last year got done a little later than usual, so I think we would put it on the list of budget things to look at in terms of potential
Yeah.
revenue increases. I
I
mean,
don't think that's
thank you.
unusual.
no.
No.
Mr. Walensky?
I favor pursuing, or at least developing, approaches to all the bullet points. At least one of them involves the collective bargaining process, maybe more than one, and for those I would rather respond in the closed session that is planned.
Mr. Tryon, how are you on these items on page 20?
Okay, let me just give an overall statement, because I would like to respond to what Mr. Turley said. And that is that, quite frankly, we're in the shape we're in because the private sector has been, the economic activity in the private sector has been significantly reduced. And I take strong exception to Mr. Turley's comments that, well, government employees have not received a pay increase for 30 months. Well, you can go out in the private sector in Calaveras County, and I'd like to see how many people have received a pay increase over the last 30 months. Mr. Turley also mentioned about how, geez, the county can't recover unless we don't cut government employee pay further. I would say there's absolutely no foundation for that argument whatsoever. The idea that we don't have a reduction in government employee pay, how that's supposed to help the private sector recover, I do not know. I would also like to take an exception to just one component of Steve's comments, that what we're witnessing is the destruction of the underpinning of good governance. I think there could be nothing further from the truth than that. I mean, we're in the position we're in because of absolutely god-awful, horrible governance, mostly at the federal level, but substantially at the state level, which is why California is the worst state of the union as far as its economy, and now they're doing shows on TV on California, the first failed state, which is embarrassing to witness. And you can even look at our own governance, whether it be the Community Development Agency or some issues in public works, or the solid waste issues. Look at the governance we had last year in the budget process, which I thought was disappointing to me in the extreme, and it's a process I do not wish to go through again this year, which is one of the reasons I was supportive of the additional funds to the administrative office, so that we could have a better budget process. But the idea that government is a solution could not be further from the truth. And it's all level of governments, including our own, whose failures have put us in the position we're in today. And I'll be the first to agree that the national and state issues are overwhelm the local issues, but we are not exactly a shining light either, in my opinion. I guess so, to come back to Maria's questions, I'm not interested, and to me the solution is not taking more money out of the private sector and giving it to the public sector. So I'm not interested in increasing fees. I'm not interested in a TOT tax, which not only takes money from the private sector into the public sector, but everybody gets giddy about because we can get somebody else to pay the cost of our doing business. And quite frankly, the tourism and the like is a huge economic component, a positive component for our economy. And all the studies say that if you can get someone to spend the night, they will spend a whole lot more money than somebody on a day trip. And to the extent we have a lower TOT and more people will spend the night, we realize significant economic benefits from that. So it gets back to my earlier question. I mean, I think this should be a closed session item, because I think whatever we're going to do to address the shortfall in 2010 and 2011 should be implemented prior to next fiscal year. And we should see what the savings from that would be. And if it's not adequate enough to fill the the $700,000 deficit, then I think we should address that that deficit and not try to basically say, well, we are immediately grab all the monies and contingencies and 520 until until the board knows fiscally where we are. To answer Jeff's question, I think the department heads should do a 17.5% reduction on their budgets. So the board and the administrative office, hopefully with some additional strength in the budgetary area within the administrative office, can take a look at what the consequences of those reductions would be by department, because in the end, the board will set the priorities, and it isn't going to be equal. The pain is not going to be equally shared by department, because it's not going to work that way. But we need to have a starting point from which to operate and know what the consequences of various courses of action will be. But I can't believe that there is going to be a solution without a meet and confer process. And I think that meet and confer process is going to permeate all the discussions the board's going to have on the budget until we get the meet and confer component determined. And obviously, the final analysis is if meet and confer and the like don't work, I suspect the final result will be the elimination of positions. Only it's not going to be like last year, where everybody knows whose positions gets eliminated and whose doesn't. At least I hope it isn't. And so I hope that everybody would be willing to share in the pain of a solution. And I would just like to end by saying, when I first came on the board in 1984, everybody was in retirement with 2% at 60. There was no 3% at 50. There was no 2% at 55. Everybody was 2% at 60. And now we've moved along to the point where one of the reasons that the private sector basically is getting to the point it can't support the costs of the government sector we have, because the cost per employee of the government sector has gone up so much, and the number of employees have gone up so much. And so there isn't anything wrong with trying to readdress some of those basic inequities. They've had some shows on the TV lately showing the level of compensation for government employees versus the private sector. And, 15, 20 years ago, why the private sector compensation was much greater than the government sector compensation, but people enjoyed the government sector because of the added security, which may be in doubt today, and also the benefit package that was so much greater than the private sector. Well, that's no longer true today. They've done studies now that show that the government sector employees are receiving a higher rate of compensation, or many government sector employees are receiving a higher rate of compensation than the private sector, along with a heck of a lot better benefit program than the private sector. So, and you can even look at our county. I mean, look at the compensation out in our county, look at the compensation of our department heads and even our deputy department heads, et cetera. And they've done studies on how many people are retiring now with a retirement of over $100,000 a year paid for by the private sector. And it's astronomical. And the idea that somehow nobody should give anything and that the solution is bigger and more money into government is not the solution. And like it or not, the reality is that the board is going to have to make decisions, and either the employees and the unions, et cetera, will sit down in good faith and negotiate a solution, or the board will be forced to use the tools that are available to it to balance the budget. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Mr. Tryon. Okay, Jeannie, are there any issues outstanding that you need direction on?
Well, I heard 3 votes for the reserve and contingency for the current as well as the bullets, not to pursue. I don't know that I heard.
You had 2 on fees.
Right.
You didn't.
No, correct. And then what about the TOT?
I'd like to talk about the fees. I'm really convinced that California is driving business away because of the cost of doing business here. I think that we should probably collectively look at the fee structure to see if there's a possibility of lowering some of the fees to attract business, to encourage business rather than raising fees to further drive them away. So, you know, I'm very much in favor of looking at the fees to accomplish both purposes if possible. And on the TOT, I think that the train has left the station to get anything on the ballot measure for this November, hasn't it?
No.
No, not for November, probably June, too early.
June
is too early. June, not necessarily November. Again, I have 2 no's, 1 possible yes.
Well, I think on the TOT, what I am going to propose is that we need to meet with the Chamber, with the Visitors Bureau. I mean, we just need to have discussions versus whether we're going to support or not support a ballot measure. I don't think we have.
Okay.
I don't feel we have enough information now.
Okay.
Because I
That's
think
the wish
there
of the board,
needs to
that's
be
fine.
a strategy.
Did you have me down as a yes? Because I'm very much in favor of pursuing the TOT.
I have you down as a yes.
Okay.
Well,
I don't
I
see
guess
3
I'm a
votes.
no. I'm a no at this
Tom's a no,
point. Tom's a
right,
no.
right.
Gary.
I'm a yes.
Right.
Okay.
And Steve?
On TOT?
Yeah.
I've stated my position a number of times on this. I think the way we approached TOT before was more particular to one part of the county than the other. Until we get a TOT allocation that is more equitable, it's impossible to pass in this county.
Okay, so you're no.
Well, I want to see a plan. I'm for an increase in TOT. I am opposed to the way we've approached it. Now, you can say that.
Okay, there you go. That's good.
I don't want to spend a lot of time and energy and money on another suicide mission out there in the electorate.
So you're along
That's
with
one.
Marita, and we'll talk to the Visitors Bureau and the Chamber and see if there's any support to run a campaign. If not,
So there's a
we'll
1 no,
drop it
a
from
2
the
let's
We'll bring
talk,
it back,
and a
though.
2 yes. Okay.
Okay, I understand that.
All right.
Now, as far as the proceeding with the 1011, I understand the need for closed session and where we want to go with that, but in terms of giving directions to departments as a starting point, I would suggest that we give directions to the board for the 17.5% because we have to start somewhere.
Okay, there's been 2. Where are the rest of the supervisors on that?
That's support.
I'm supporting.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you. Shirley, anything else that we've missed?
Okay, thank you, staff. We really look forward